Today on Doomed! Peter Thiel, the Contrarian. On today's episode of Doomed, we will be doing a deep dive. A new book has just come out detailing the life of Peter Thiel, the Silicon Valley venture capitalist, Trump backer, all around seemingly super villain, like from like a comic book-esque type guy. But we'll be diving into it all with the author of this great new book. And before we go any further, let me pull him up on the screen so I can give him a proper introduction. Here we go. 1 second here. Pulling up his mic. And joining me now is Max Chafkin. He's the author of The Contrarian, Peter Thiel in Silicon Valley's Pursuit of Power, and a features editor with Bloomberg Businessweek. Max, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm super excited to have you because this is a big week, actually. This is the book just came out yesterday.
Yep. Yeah. It's still very fresh. So, yeah.
Wow. And you're here with me. I appreciate that.
You know what? When you're working on something for so long, I was working on this for like 3.5 years, and you're just, mostly all by yourself. It's such a relief and so exciting to just talk about it, have the work out in the world.
Now this is perfect, actually, because this show covers a lot of the worlds, because there's many of them, that Peter Thiel exists in, whether it's the tech world, the world of right-wing and conservatism, and then he's been a major figure through it all. And there might be some listeners who are tuning in, whether on the live stream or catching the podcast after, who are thinking, Peter Thiel, I'm not too familiar with this guy. I've probably heard his name, but who is Peter Thiel? And I think there's possibly no one better to answer that question right now than you.
Yeah. So I'm a tech reporter. Like, that's what I've been doing for most of my career, last 15 years. And basically from when I got into journalism around 2005 to 2016, early 2016, what Peter Thiel was really like the most important venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. So he was the first investor, the first outside investor in Facebook, mentor to Mark Zuckerberg. He kind of shows up, if you've seen the movie The Social Network, he's the guy who sort of sets Mark Zuckerberg up with the deal that sets him on a collision course with Eduardo Saverin, who was the co-founder, got pushed out. Thiel co-founded PayPal. He co-founded Palantir. And really, which is this, I'm sure you're very familiar, listeners are very familiar, but I'll just say it anyway. It's a data mining defense contractor. It's now worth billions of dollars, but of course it was a startup, 15 years ago. Anyway, he's this guy who's, inside and around and basically everywhere in Silicon Valley. The sort of tech world, people talk about the PayPal mafia, and that's this group of sort of power players, more or less led by Thiel, who work together, they support each other's companies, they move employees around. It includes Elon Musk, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, the YouTube guys, the Yelp guys, the list goes on and on. Now, that would all, I think, be super interesting and probably enough to like justify a book, because obviously these companies are really powerful. This is a powerful guy. We should read about him. But of course, as probably a lot of people know, in 2016, Thiel kind of shifts and stops being just this tech guy. And in May of 2016, shows up on the delegate list for the state of California for the Republican National Convention as a Trump supporter, and then becomes a major Trump backer throughout the rest of the campaign, and then into the first couple years of the presidency. And then also, same month, almost at the exact same time, is exposed and then kind of gloriously, in his mind, takes credit for the destruction of Gawker Media, which, was this, substantial journalistic outlet, kind of probably associated with, slightly left journalism. It wasn't like overtly political or anything. But in that kind of one fell swoop, Thiel establishes himself not just as this tech guy, but as this, as you said, kind of super villain / if you're on the right, superhero. And because, at the RNC, when he gives that speech, people are talking about Gawker, they're talking about PayPal, they're talking about this. This is a guy who really, who really embodies like everything that they like about Trumpism. And so what I want to do in this book is kind of explore that. I really think tech power is one of the most important issues that is going on right now. And I think Thiel is kind of unique in that he's both this, super influential tech figure, but also somebody who really is making moves, on a political level. And what I really want to do is kind of cut through, all those narratives, the superhero narrative, the supervillain narrative, try to figure out like what is actually, going on here.
Wow, right. So I mean, you basically have hit it all. That's the most perfect concise summary. But let's now dive a little bit deeper into Peter Thiel. I guess let's start with the early years before he becomes this political figure. It's amazing to me because like I think people don't realize, as I say that I'm jumping ahead now, but I think people don't realize, when they hear about this secret event Trump was at with Mark Zuckerberg, a private dinner, and this thing and that thing. Peter, oftentimes I don't think people read that Peter Thiel was present during all this. So let's jump back into the early days of Peter Thiel. I mean, I'm assuming this is a guy who's always been sort of very controversial, even in the tech world, because I mean, to this day, apparently, Elon Musk, who he formerly worked with, does not like. I mean, and I'm no Musk fan either, but they don't like each other apparently. So he must have always been this hard-headed type of guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So Thiel, I'll give you kind of the short history, kind of summarizing the early parts of the book. But, he kind of had a somewhat difficult childhood, bullied as a kid, parents, I think super conservative parents. They're German immigrants, evangelical Christians. He lived in South Africa, under apartheid, and his father worked in, the mining industry in South Africa and Southwest Africa, which, basically at the time, that's Namibia now, but at the time that was like a South African colony. So, he's really, kind of living in this really probably pretty conservative world. And he shows up at Stanford University. Stanford is not, I don't think it's the most liberal of the elite, college campuses. Probably, I would say actually one of the most conservative places. But for Peter Thiel, huge culture shock. He kind of processes that as an attack against him. And he starts this right-wing newspaper called the Stanford Review. And I wouldn't be bringing any of this up. It's kind of ancient history. Stanford Review is, I think nowadays, you talk about sort of trollishness. I mean, this is kind of like classic, like we're gonna say things that are kind of borderline, racist or sexist, and to try to basically get under the skin of the Stanford administration, the university administration, and show people, that there's this, that this isn't right, and et cetera. That matters because he starts PayPal, and PayPal is this, financial services company. Lots of people probably have already used it. But the core of PayPal, these early guys were these same Stanford Review guys. It was actually like, in a weird way, PayPal was a continuation of this activist political project that Thiel started at Stanford. And that's, not super well known. And I think it kind of sets some of the tone for the rest of his career, because he was always a technologist, but also always, this kind of hard right ideologue, and somebody who's really interested not just in he's super interested in making money, but also interested in this political in putting forward this political agenda.
Right. That's interesting you say that, because he about his early life. I actually didn't know that about Peter Thiel, with the growing up in South Africa, the mining company, because he starts PayPal, and then PayPal acquires Elon Musk's payment processing startup. And doesn't Musk have like almost the exact same childhood beginnings?
Yeah, I mean, Musk, there is this whole crew of South Africans who kind of made it big in Silicon Valley. I mean, Musk's trajectory is a little different in the sense that, he kind of ran away from home, and but yeah, another South African, another white South African, and of course Thiel's not South African.
Didn't both their parents have like mining companies too?
I think so. Well, I actually am not like totally up on the Musk family tree. I've heard there are stories, and I just don't want to like speak out of turn. Thiel's
Right.
dad was a project manager for mining, and so he was kind of moving around the world, working basically in the nuclear industry, and what's super interesting about sort of doing uranium mining in South Africa in the 1970s. If you know the history, like South Africa was frantically against the will of the United Nations, like trying to get the atom bomb because they wanted to protect the regime. And so if you are sort of a manager at a uranium mining firm in South Africa, like that puts you, very much on, you're very bought in to that, to the apartheid system in so many different ways. And of course, this isn't Thiel. Thiel has nothing to do with this because he's a little kid. But I think it's important because I do think if you're trying to understand like where somebody's kind of sense of persecution comes from, especially somebody, like him who, there's no obvious reason to think he should be persecuted, I think he's more likely to experience some of the stuff that happened to him as a high schooler, as an undergraduate, as kind of, an attack. But the other thing about it is like Thiel is just like, all the background stuff is really interesting. And, I think is like super important to understanding somebody like Thiel or somebody like Musk. But also like this is a guy who's just like super ambitious. And, I think one thing that I think is maybe underappreciated is that like being this provocateur, being the guy, and this was definitely true, when he was in college in the 1980s, I think it's true now. Being the guy who's like willing to say the crazy thing, like that is a pretty good business model in certain areas of the political spectrum. Like if you want to get a job, if you wanted to get an internship at the Reagan White House, being the kind of guy who would kind of like be just on the edge of respectability at Stanford, that would be a good way to do it. And Thiel did get an internship at the Reagan White House. And the other thing I'll say about the kind of ambition here, you talked about Musk, Peter Thiel and Musk, they started competing payments companies. They eventually merged. Musk, who was more successful with more money and, a bigger reputation, ended up sort of being the senior partner of that merger. He was in charge of the company. And Musk flies away for his honeymoon for 2 weeks, and he comes back and he's been ousted in a coup by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is like one of the only people that I can think of who has, gone toe to toe with Elon Musk, basically stabbed him in the back or even stabbed him in the face and come out of it in one piece. So like he definitely is, a formidable figure because he was able to sort of best Musk, navigate this company. And the guys in Silicon Valley are sharks, right? And so he was able to kind of deal with that and come out of it, looking really good. And it kind of set him on this, career trajectory, both, to make a huge amount of money and then to acquire, huge amounts of power.
Right. So he moves on from PayPal. And what is next in Peter Thiel's sights after PayPal?
So a couple of things. So PayPal had this technology that they were using to deal with money laundering. It's a payments company, so security is a big deal. Thiel comes up with this idea, and honestly, really smart idea, that he could sell this to the Bush administration because he sells PayPal in 2002. Remember back post 9/11, there's all of this kind of like anxiety over data mining. Did we capture enough? There were all these terrorists who were doing all these suspicious things, and the FBI missed all the facts. We gotta really do a lot of data mining. Remember, there's Patriot Act, there's all this stuff going on. Thiel kind of comes up with this brilliant thing to sell, which is, hey, like I'm a Silicon Valley guy, I could do data mining, I could do your data mining, and he starts this company called Palantir. And the premise of Palantir is that they're gonna like look through all this data and sort of figure out who the bad people are, right? And it sounds pretty good, and it was very successful at first. But of course, as like civil libertarians will point out, data mining can be a very slippery slope because you think it's never clear exactly what you're looking for. And you can learn a lot by looking at even a very small amount of data. So if somebody looks at your sort of Facebook traffic, they can tell, not only who your friends are, but they could probably tell who you vote for, whether you're married, whether you have any pre-existing medical conditions, what your sexuality is, and so it gets pretty scary pretty quickly. And the interesting thing is Palantir basically embraces that, right? They kind of use it. And again, I mean, I think you have to respect the brilliance of it on some level, because they sort of sold Big Brother. It wasn't like journalists said, "Hey, you're Big Brother. No one should buy you." And they said, no, we're not Big Brother. They kind of nodded their heads and said, yeah, that's right. We are Big Brother. And the CIA invested in us, what the CIA did. And they used that to sell their service, not just to the government, but to lots of corporations, police departments, and so on. So it was this kind of incredibly devious marketing pitch. And I think that is something that is kind of like trademark Peter Thiel. Like, the guy is, he's a good futurist, but he's also, a brilliant marketer. And, one of the things that, I try to do in the book is just kind of figure out and understand where the marketing, where does the truth begin, and where's the marketing end, where's the truth begin, and how should, regular people or whatever think through something like Palantir.
Right. Before I get further into Palantir, I actually just wanted to point out, I really think it's great that you honed in on the fact that, Peter Thiel is a very smart guy. Because, we're talking, early on you said, to the right, he's probably a superhero. To everybody else, he's a supervillain. To this audience, he's probably the supervillain, I can safely guess. But, I think that's super important, especially to point out in a year, or a year, really 2 years, I would say, where, conspiracy theories and people falling down rabbit holes and being brainwashed and falling for all sorts of conspiratorial things, it was so big. I think that's really important to point out. Peter Thiel is a guy who knows exactly what he's doing. He's a very smart guy, and everything he's doing, it's not like, he's going to have some come to Jesus moment later in his life and go, I was wrong. No, this is who he is, and he has everything set out to, everything he does is in order to benefit him in some way, and he's a very smart guy who's planned it that way.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I mean, I think that I think that he is like you say, strategically he's got a lot of smarts, and I think he's been also very successful at kind of manipulating both the media and not just the media, but kind of an entire universe of kind of Silicon Valley people to bring them along to his worldview. And one of the things, so around the same time he started Palantir, he made this investment in Facebook. And it's always one of the sort of really interesting questions, I think, to ask, when you're talking about tech power or whatever, is well, okay, what does Mark Zuckerberg believe? What is his worldview? Because it's been a little bit confusing. Remember, during the Obama years, Zuckerberg kind of made some noises, kind of styled himself as this kind of center left, kind of Obama style guy. He was for DACA. He's sort of palling it up with Cory Booker on charter schools, and kind of this kind of technocratic Obama-esque liberal, right? That's kind of what he looked like. And then during Trump, he kind of starts to look like maybe a little less liberal, maybe a little bit more sympathetic to sort of Republicans, and maybe a little bit more libertarian, something like that. I mean, I think, is my argument in the book, that really Zuckerberg is basically a Thielist, and his ideology is Peter Thiel's ideology. And I don't think that Peter Thiel's ideology, although it is, in some ways it has a far right or nationalist, kind of Trumpist component. It's not just that. And the thing I argue in the book, and I think is super important to understand, when we're talking about not just Thiel, but a lot of these tech companies, is that it's not just, it's not just right wing. It is this idea that tech companies and a specific kind of tech company and a specific kind of tech founder, these tech billionaires, people like Mark Zuckerberg, should do whatever it takes to get as big as possible, as quickly as possible, to accrue power, as much as possible. And it's not just that Mark Zuckerberg is allowed to break the rules in this worldview, he should break the rules. They view that as almost like a badge of honor. It's like if you ignore a regulation, if you don't pay your taxes, that's good. You are doing something good for the world. And I think that is an ideology. That's not really an ideology that I think tracks totally politically, but I think it really helps explain a lot of the kind of bad behavior that we've seen, out of the tech industry over the last, 15 or 20 years. And you see it not just from, basically right-leaning CEOs. You also see it from people who otherwise kind of identify or whatever as liberals or centrists or something like that.
Right. I mean, it's right in that old school like tech startup mantra where it's like, break like build fast and break stuff or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But Peter Thiel, to me, he's interesting because he has specifically you ask Mark Zuckerberg to describe his political leaning and he probably would give you a word salad because he probably doesn't even really know how to describe it. Whereas Peter Thiel, I remember early on when I was first discovering Peter Thiel in the early 2010s, I remember he was a major figure among the libertarian movement. I remember he was a hardcore, he had a project, the Seasteading movement.
Yeah,
where he wanted
exactly.
to build islands in the middle of the ocean, not actual land, giant boats where people lived on in the middle of the ocean, so they didn't have to listen to any country's rules. Libertarian paradise.
Yep. So no taxes. You can do all the drug experimenting you want. You can do all weird medical research. It's living the dream to a libertarian.
Right. But then this is a guy who is also running Palantir. It seems like that's the thing that's most baffling to me. Peter Thiel, there's no consensus with his own ideologies. He has this belief that the government should be small and don't pay your taxes and break things and don't listen to what they tell you. Yet somehow he wants to rake in these millions and probably billions of dollars from taxpayer funds for the fund of government.
Yeah, it's so funny that you're saying that. I mean, I think there is this tendency, to call him a libertarian, and he's not a libertarian, or he's not a libertarian, at least in the way I think most people think about libertarians. I think so there are a few things about that. I mean, one is, and I talk about this in the book, I think Thiel, there are aspects of that libertarian philosophy that he likes, right? One great thing about seasteading is not paying your taxes. Peter Thiel, super into, optimizing, let's put it kindly, optimizing his, tax situation. And I think that, one thing about this, the seasteading movement, even if you don't literally want to live on an island, on a floating island paradise where you can, do all the recreational drugs you want or whatever and do medical research. I don't think Peter Thiel really literally wants to do that. I think what he wants to do is, create advocacy to allow people like himself to pay lower taxes. The other thing is, I think Peter Thiel he's super interested in power. And something interesting, something big was happening right around that time, the time that you're talking about, which is that there was this, this nascent Ron Paul movement, right? It started in 2008 and then kind of grew. And then Ron Paul ran for president in 2012. And Thiel was a huge supporter of Ron Paul. He donated a lot of money to Ron Paul. And at the time, I talked to some of the people who worked on the Ron Paul campaign, people who were, kind of libertarian gadflies who were around this movement, and they were super excited about Peter Thiel. They were like, "Oh my God! We found our billionaire. We got this crazy guy, Ron Paul. He's running as a libertarian, and we have this guy, Peter Thiel, who sees for seasteading. This is great. This is the best thing that ever happened to us." Thiel, around that time, gave an interview that I don't think has been noticed much, but he says that, this is not about libertarians. It's about setting us up for 2016. And I think the thing that Thiel realized, and the thing that actually there are a lot of other people around Ron Paul realized, is that some of Ron Paul's support had to do with libertarianism, but some of it had to do, and I'm going to paraphrase this guy who wrote this great Ron Paul book, which I think it's called Ron Paul's Revolution. But I talked to him for the book, and he's like, there were people who were supporting libertarians, but there were also people who just wanted to be with the guy who was saying the craziest thing, and that was the Ron Paul they liked. And so it was an easy jump to Donald Trump. So I think what Thiel was trying to do is not ally himself with libertarians, but to sort of put him in the center of this kind of nascent political movement. And that is the political movement of the alt-right and of Donald Trump and of, kind of, I don't quite know how we're supposed to talk about it now. It's kind of the post-Trump Trumpist party. And that is the party that Thiel is trying to lead right now. It's the party of, J.D. Vance, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz. Those are all guys who Thiel has donated, substantial amounts of money to. And these are the guys who are, more or less like, they're not pro-insurrection. They're just kind of like insurrection. They're like okay-ish with the insurrection. They're, they're not saying the election was stolen, but they have a lot of serious questions about the election. They're kind of dog whistling to the most extreme parts of the Trumpist movement, and that's Thiel's movement. And I think that is what he was doing in around the time that you're talking about, around the time he's talking about seasteading and things like that.
Right. The interesting thing there, I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I want to talk about where Peter Thiel's going in the future towards the end. But interesting thing there is Ron Paul and Donald Trump, say what you want about them, and I have said a lot. The one thing you can definitely say about them is that they do give off authenticity, whereas this slate from this new slate Peter Thiel is pushing forward, like J.D. Vance, give off quite the opposite of that.
Well, and I think you're putting your finger on something, and you kind of said it in another way when you're talking about the seasteading thing. But there is just not a lot of consistency to the worldview here beyond. I mean, I think there is one thing that's consistent, and that is the idea that tech billionaires should kind of be in charge of everything. And maybe also a second piece of consistency is being super skeptical of democracy, kind of thinking maybe democracy isn't so good. But besides that, it sometimes feels like a hodgepodge of beliefs that are either designed to be provocative and kind of get people, sort of like what we think of influencer behavior. And I actually think thinking about him as like an influencer or something is maybe not a totally bad framework. But it's also like just ways to make money. And Peter Thiel is, I think, in some ways at his core, hedge fund guy. Around that time, sort of the post PayPal time when he's investing in, Facebook and starting Palantir. If you ask like a regular sort of like reader of the Wall Street Journal or somebody who reads, Bloomberg, where I work, who's Peter Thiel? They would say, oh, Peter Thiel, he's the most famous hedge fund manager in the world. Thiel had a hedge fund worth billions of dollars. And, he kind of lost it all during the financial crisis or lost most of it. And I think that the hedge fund thing, it's not about having one belief, right? It's about making a bunch of different bets. Sometimes those bets are in conflict. Peter Thiel had this company, Palantir, that's trying to sell to the U.S. government. It's backed by the CIA. At the same time, he's shorting the U.S. economy. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense unless your goal is just to make a lot of money. That isn't like, quote unquote. And I don't have a problem with people shorting the U.S. economy, but it isn't like quote unquote patriotic behavior or something like that. It's totally inconsistent if you're like, oh, we need to, support the U.S. and also, by the way, I'm going to bet on the decline of the U.S., which is exactly, what he was doing. So I think there's a quality to it where, that moral inconsistency, raises real questions about, is there even any kind of like greater moral philosophy behind Thiel or some of his peers? And I'm not really sure there is. And I don't even know. I'm not sure which would be better. If you're against democracy, like that seems pretty bad. And if you have no ethos, that also but I think it's worth asking.
Well, shit. I mean,
but anyway, I just think I do think that there's a lot of work is done, especially among Thiel's supporters, to kind of make this all fit together. And it's possible it just doesn't fit together. I mean, he's talked about having this background program where he just tries to say the opposite of whatever somebody's saying, and you actually can see this sometimes where he sometimes seems to just pick the provocative thing just for the hell of it. It's like the classic kind of like trollish, taking the piss kind of behavior, which of course like works really well if you're like a right-wing student activist, and is maybe like not necessarily the behavior you want in somebody who has like a huge amount of responsibility in our society.
Right, right. I think we should go to this point now, because I think this is sort of maybe where Peter Thiel starts to get onto people's radar. And also, I guess it might be the moment where he realizes just how much he can have an effect on things directly. And also, I think it's a perfect example of basically what you pointed out earlier, where this is a guy who seems to be guided simply by what is best for him, what is something he can do for himself. And to me, this is the most perfect example of being a vengeful person. And this is what Peter Thiel did to Gawker. I mean, he basically single-handedly destroyed in my estimation, a very valuable news outlet. Sure, they were smarmy and sarcastic and pushed the envelope or whatever, like a lot of other outlets in that vein do. But they were legit news, online news outlet who broke a lot of big stories. And Peter Thiel basically funded Hulk Hogan's lawsuit against them, and put them out of business.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's important to be super honest about the shortcomings of Gawker, because it wasn't perfect, and I think so Gawker in 2008 published a post. Thiel's gay. They published a post with the title "Peter Thiel is totally gay people." It was kind of a styled as like a highbrow meditation on the closet, but really, it was the first time anyone had said publicly like what his sexuality was, and he wasn't ready for that. Gawker was also, and was very angry, and I think probably justifiably angry. Gawker was also, as you say, and doing incredibly important journalism, and I think they were one of the only outlets at the time that was actually writing about tech power. They were, and I think that's a second reason why Thiel went after them. It's not just because of the outing; it's because they were out there, day in, day out, kind of poking the bubble, saying like, this guy is styling himself as a genius. He's not a genius. He just lost, billions of dollars of his investors' money. That was true. That was good journalism, and they did a lot of good journalism on top of, some stuff that I think now a lot of journalists would probably wouldn't publish that. Like I'm an editor now. Like I would not have published that story today. But anyway, I bring all that up because I think even if I think it's possible to have a reasonable disagreement about what Gawker did. And Gawker's status. But I also think that Thiel's campaign against Gawker wasn't just about, it wasn't just about an emotional response to having hurt feelings. It wasn't just about this post outing him. It was planting a flag in the ground to tell not just Gawker, but any other outlet, any other journalist that, that they should be on notice, that scrutinizing the life of a billionaire is not cool, and that it will ruin you, and not just ruin you, like cost you your job, but which of course lots of Gawker reporters, there were more than 100 reporters or something like that who lost their jobs. Reporters had nothing to do, of course, with this post. But it sent the publication into bankruptcy, and it sent the owner of Gawker into personal bankruptcy. And that's not just something that sends a chilling effect to anybody who wants to write about Peter Thiel, somebody like me. It also sends a chilling effect to anyone who wants to write about any billionaire, because that is now a playbook that anyone can follow, and certainly are following. I mean, there are more pre-publication threats now than there were before. I can tell you, every newsroom counsel thinks about this now and thinks about the risk posed by picking a fight with a rich person. And I think, as somebody who believes, very strongly, in the importance of freedom of press or whatever, I think that is really, really troubling. So yeah, and I think it's doubly troubling because Peter Thiel talks about it like he says it's his greatest philanthropic act, that is something he's legitimately proud of. And I think that really is, it's putting down a marker. It's saying to anyone who is listening, this could happen again, and good. And, people keep asking me, like, are you afraid if Peter Thiel's gonna sue you or something like that? And I say, yeah, but I'm like afraid that any billionaire could sue me, because there's no reason. There's nothing special here about Peter Thiel. Like, it didn't cost him that much to go after Gawker, and there are lots of people with that kind of money. So
Right. I can tell you, as a pro wrestling fan, when that lawsuit was going on, it was very, very troubling time. And then the second Hogan tape, unrelated to Gawker, with him being a racist, dropped, and then it made the side I was on much easier than that. But anyway,
funny thing, Thiel is like I think probably partly because of the Hulk Hogan thing. But he's like a pro wrestling fan. He talks all the time about kayfabe, and I've found myself.
Wait, Peter Thiel's a wrestling fan?
He says, I mean, at least
Oh,
in the
boy.
sense of,
Now
at least
you're really...
I know I'm making things hard for you. I know. He went to, I'm trying to think. I think he went to Robert Mercer's costume party dressed as Hulk Hogan, I believe, like right after the 2016 election. People should check on that, but I'm pretty sure that story is true. Anyway, what I was going to say is, I've often found this. You talked about Thiel as a villain at the top of this, right? And I think sometimes Thiel himself is playing that role. He's playing the role of the heel. Like, and I think it's useful because that can create its own power. Like, if people are afraid of you, in the case of Gawker, right, that gives you power that you did not otherwise have. So I don't know. It's funny. He's definitely absorbed at least some of the some wrestling knowledge from the Hogan case.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think, in the era of Trump, I feel like people who are into both pro wrestling, or were back in the day, and are into politics now, seem to have a better understanding of the dynamics of everything, because it really does seem like the modern day right is just playing up like the heel role in what would be a pro wrestling storyline.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Thiel said something very similar about that, and I mean, in a different context, but yeah, I think he's somebody who has an awareness. And of course he would, because he did all kinds of outrageous stuff, as a college student, stuff that, deliberately provocative, just stuff that's, designed to get under people's skin. And I think, his support of the alt-right, or his, it's maybe dalliances with the alt-right or something like that makes more sense, is totally of a piece with that. It's like seeing these promising young troublemakers, helping them out, trying to harness their energy and using it to his advantage.
Right. So, going from this conversation, I think now would be a good time to bring up, and you might not have covered this in your book because it's so recent, but Peter Thiel is apparently the big money behind the rise of the new conservative YouTube, the video platform Rumble.
Yep.
And
I think I mentioned it briefly, but yeah, that's you're right. It's happened in the last in the last couple of months even.
Right. Now to me, what's interesting here is, and Glenn Greenwald, who is someone I have trouble with, because this is a guy who I'm sure everyone knows the story by now. This is a guy I respected, and I know that he watched me when I was on the Majority Report, when I was co-hosting with Michael Brooks. And, so it's weird to see the direction he's gone in, but it's extra weird to see him basically talk nicely about someone like Peter Thiel. I mean, Peter Thiel, in every sense imaginable, is someone that, someone like Glenn Greenwald would view as like public enemy number one. It's just so bizarre to me to see him basically talk about Thiel in a positive light. And it's basically, Thiel is funding this Rumble platform. He's the reason why Rumble hired all these creators and are paying them large sums of money to post exclusively to Rumble, at least for like the first 24 or 48 hours or whatever.
Right.
And Greenwald is one of those people, apparently making six figures from posting videos on Rumble. It's just so bizarre to me. So bizarre.
I mean, it's tough to be canceled, right? I mean, you just you gotta take those multi-$100,000 deals from Rumble. I So I have a couple of thoughts on this. I mean, so Greenwald, people maybe know this, you probably know this, but I'll mention it anyway. Greenwald got wrapped up with Palantir. Early on, Palantir got caught writing this proposal or being involved in this proposal to do like an information operation against Glenn Greenwald. It's mentioned in the book. Where these slides, basically a sales pitch leaked, and it was like, here's how we're going to ruin Glenn Greenwald's reputation, 5 bullet points. They were trying. It was a proposal because Anonymous, the hacktivist group, had gotten some documents. I think they were trying to leak them to WikiLeaks, or some kind of like weird, kind of creepy corporate, espionage thing aimed at Glenn Greenwald. Okay, Palantir apologized. As usual, probably a little bit half-heartedly. Like they apologized. CEO said, "Oh, we never knew this was going on." Of course, the guys who did the proposal, they kept their jobs. They now have better jobs, in Peter Thiel's world. But anyway, Glenn Greenwald was specifically, targeted. So that is something that I think is bizarre. Although, and again, this is probably like some armchair psychology here, and you probably know better than me. But I feel like Greenwald is somebody who has that same kind of Thiel. I just want to like be under people's skin. If I'm not pissing people, it's like he just gets a charge from being disagreeable. And I think there's some of that with Thiel. So it may be that. And also, right, it's hard to look down the nose at this kind of at a huge sum of money. The other thing is. So Thiel and JD Vance are both investors in this thing. JD Vance is running for Senate in Ohio. He worked for Peter Thiel. He was a never Trumper, and earlier this year he went on Sebastian Gorka's podcast. Sebastian Gorka, big time Trump guy, and basically apologized. He begged forgiveness. He's wrong about Trump. No longer a never Trumper. And he is also, while running for Senate with $10 million of Peter Thiel's money, which he got after, making this, having this conversion, he's an investor in Rumble. And I think it kind of helps explain like what's going on with Thiel, because Thiel always has two projects. One project is political, which is, putting forward these kind of right-wing, hard-right, nationalist, kind of borderline authoritarians, anti-immigration, anti-democracy, et cetera, and putting forward these businesses that kind of feed off of that and make money because of it. So like obviously Palantir does very well doing business with the US government. Palantir, made money, had contracts with Donald Trump's ICE. And so it's like a virtuous or a vicious cycle where the companies are feeding into the political thing, and the political thing is feeding into the companies. And I think the best analogy is basically the Koch brothers, who did a very similar thing. There's a really great book, Kochland, that I read. I think it's Christopher Leonard, but it explains this super well. Where like you just have you have this political thing going on, and you have the advocacy, and they're working together, and it's just this like, glorious thing where the billionaire who's doing it gets super rich while promoting, a version of their ideology. And it's always hard to untangle those two things.
Right. I'm so glad you pointed it out, because I actually was, debating with Greenwald on Twitter when he announced his Rumble partnership, and all the other people who were joining Rumble, who just all happened to be contrarian-esque, right-leaning figures like himself, and he'll point out, oh, but Tulsi Gabbard was a Democrat, who, by the way, used her last time in the House to her last thing she did was actually try to push some random like anti-trans bill that had no way to pass. Like she was just already making the play for the right, that right-wing money. And I pointed out, listen, if Peter Thiel or any billionaire wanted to fund this like journalistic endeavor or whatever endeavor to center voices from across the political spectrum, like how you're selling it, then fine. If like you showed me like, oh, here's like a far, someone on like a socialist talker, and then like a far right talker and a centrist talker, and these were all then fine, I would believe it. But you're trying to convince me that like Peter Thiel is funding the voices of the voiceless. Like, no, like this is clearly his play at trying to push forward people who will promote his own ideological leanings.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the interesting things. And this is true, of course, about money in general. But, one objection I've heard, right, is like, well, Peter Thiel, he's hands off. He doesn't do much, and that's kind of, but kind of the beautiful thing about being Peter Thiel is you don't have to tell J.D. Vance to do something, right? Peter Thiel has kind of put it out there basically that he will fund people who express his beliefs, and they just come to him. And there's no, there doesn't have to be some kind of great, conspiracy or whatever to do it. So I mean, kind of one of the amusing things to me is J.D. Vance, recently came out in favor of crypto, right? He put out this big statement, as a big believer in crypto, and you're kind of like, I mean, like, okay, I guess, but like, what is a right-wing populist, this kind of, Ohio, nothing about that fits with the kind of J.D. Vance persona. There's nothing that Mama wants to do with crypto, at least I don't think. But
the coal miners in West Virginia are demanding their Dogecoin. They're demanding it.
But of course, there is somebody who really is adamant about the rights of crypto holders, and that's Peter Thiel. And it's really it's one of these things where like that's a huge priority for the kind of Silicon Valley right, and it's really nice to have a Senate candidate who is kind of expressing those views. And again, I don't know that Peter Thiel demanded that out of J.D. Vance. I just think you once you have that money and you've sort of set up a track record of spending it, then things just kind of work out that way. It's kind of the opposite of the Gawker thing, right? It's just like sending a signal that and then watching people fall in line. And that's why I think that, Thiel really has the potential to be very powerful over the next, I don't know, like 4 to 8 years or something like that, because, Vance and Blake Masters, who are his two main candidates, they might not win their primaries. I think there's like a lot of reasons to doubt it. Vance has not done super well in the polls. Masters, who still works for Thiel, is very inexperienced politically. He's a young guy. But like Thiel's spending $10 million on each of their campaigns. They might win. And if they do, he will have a huge amount of control in a potentially Republican-controlled Senate after 2022. And even if they don't, this kind of Trumpist movement needs a patron, and Thiel has basically set himself up to be that guy, to be, the coax to the Trump party or the Patriot Party or whatever we want to call this kind of populist, nationalist right.
Right. Now, you might know better than me, but it seems like if you are someone who enjoys libertarianism for all the reasons of avoiding paying your taxes and hiding your money from the big nanny state, crypto seems to be an area you'd be quite interested in. Has Peter Thiel backed any crypto companies?
Yeah, he's very involved in crypto companies, of course, and he's held at various times crypto. I don't know if he does now. And of course, the beautiful thing about crypto, if you're a freedom lover or just somebody who's averse to paying your taxes, Peter Thiel's both, of course. You don't necessarily have to tell anyone that you have the crypto holdings. So I don't think we really know. I will say one thing that I think is super interesting. PayPal in the early years, when Thiel's running PayPal, we think of that. We think of PayPal, it's like a way to buy stuff on eBay, right? It's just like Visa for eBay, and it is that. But early on, Thiel was talking about it openly expressly in these very terms. He was talking about PayPal as a Swiss bank account in your pocket, as a way for people who live in repressive regimes to, avoid currency controls, as something that would lead to the decline of the nation state. And like that is all like very radical, and it's kind of exactly how the crypto heads talk. Not all crypto heads, right? But a lot of them, really buy into these exact same ideas. And I think there's definitely an ideological debt to Thiel. And of course, Thiel's not done with crypto. He's still making moves. I think it's still, kind of one of his big interests going forward.
Now, speaking of avoiding paying taxes, one excerpt from your book was making the rounds either I think last week about how Peter Thiel basically used Trump in order to preserve his wealth and avoid paying the IRS, and he was pushed a number of different things, I believe, to try to pay less in taxes. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So Thiel's a huge amount of Thiel's wealth, more than $5 billion, possibly a lot more than $5 billion, is in something called a Roth IRA. A Roth IRA, it was created during the Clinton era as a kind of savings account for middle class and lower middle class people. So it was it had exceedingly low caps. You could only put in like around $2,000 a year. If you made more, I can't remember the exact amount, but it's, if you made more than about 100K, you couldn't, this thing is not for you. It was not intended for billionaires. Thiel figured out that startup stock, which is the stock he had in PayPal, could, you can buy that for almost nothing. It's basically worthless. And also, by the way, if you're the CEO of the company, you don't necessarily have the right to set the price of the stock. But I think that there are things that in your power to influence the price of that stock. So Thiel was able to put a huge amount of PayPal shares inside of this Roth IRA. And once it's inside of the Roth IRA, he doesn't pay any taxes. And that money has grown over the years and has gone into Palantir and Facebook and probably a bunch of other companies that that we don't know about, that we know about those three. And Thiel has made $5 billion, and his tax liability on that is zero, because it's all in the Roth IRA. The interesting thing about a Roth IRA is if you break the rules, if it turns out that you were violating the income limit, or there's a rule against buying stock in companies that you control. If you do that, then the whole IRA is done. You have to pay tax on the whole thing. It's so you violate one rule, the whole thing is kaput. And that created, as I reported in the excerpt you're talking about, which came out in Bloomberg last week, that created a lot of vulnerability for Thiel. And talking to people in his world, that then became a thing that motivated him in all sorts of ways. One of which was supporting Donald Trump, one of which was acquiring citizenship in New Zealand, which he did in secret. And it came out, it happened in 2012, I believe, or maybe 2011, came out years later. But, it's the same kind of thing. And of course, that is totally in keeping with the kind of Thiel, Seasteading, like having these kind of tax haven backup plans to avoid, the intrusions, right, as they see it, of the federal government. So I think that's part of what explains, like, why does this gay immigrant with 2 Stanford degrees who's obsessed with the future back a reactionary, anti-immigrant guy from a political party that is, hostile in most ways to gay people, and it's because of the taxing. But I also think there is some ideological, sort of alliance between Trump and Thiel, in the sense that, Trump's whole thing was and is, being the guy who says the thing that's going to make people mad, that's going to, he's going to be the one to say the racist thing and get away with it. And that is kind of like a big part of Peter Thiel's, what Peter Thiel thinks is sort of wrong with the world, right? He's like one of these guys who thinks that, quote unquote, political correctness is like, if he had to rank the world's problems, like that would be one of the big problems. And so I think there is like an extent to which, as different as those two men are, there are things about them where they actually were pretty, kind of simpatico in a weird and totally unexpected way. So I think partly this kind of classic, rich guy move, and partly, an ideological move.
Now, I feel like there's still so much to cover, but we can't cover it all because that people got to go check out the book. But there are just a couple more things if you have a few more minutes. I feel like we can't, finish this interview, this conversation, without talking about one of the weirdest things about Peter Thiel, and this was a big story back in the day. I don't know if people who just become hip to who he is are aware of this, but tell me about him injecting young people's blood into his body in order to keep himself youthful.
Okay, so I'm gonna start by saying I don't think it's true. I think, but just in case people don't know the conspiracy, or this idea, I'll lay it out there. So Thiel's super interested in living forever. That's something he's talked about, and he's funded research into this thing called parabiosis. Parabiosis is kind of like a fringe science that involves stitching two mice together, an old one and a young one. And there were some weird experiments that seemed to show that when you did that, the older mice would live longer. And there are these kind of fringe doctors out there who are doing plasma infusions with quote unquote young blood. So that's like, if you were a rich guy, you go to this center and they give you some blood from a strapping, I don't know, 20-year-old or something. And that's supposed to make you healthier. There's not a lot of scientific, of course there's some, very broad like theories on it. I don't know. It's not like, this is not something that has like a ton of basis there's no like double blind study showing this is a good idea. Thiel did, sort of cop to, and then a journalist, found this clinic where he had at least had, or somebody who worked for him at least had some contact, some exploratory contact, trying to figure out if this is something they could do. I investigated this, and I talked to the clinic. I'm pretty skeptical of the claim. Like, I just think, as I said, that the science just feels like it's really out there. I feel like even Peter Thiel is not crazy enough to do it. Although I totally bet he's explored it, and it would be open to it. But of course it's a metaphor, and it's a very useful metaphor. And that's why, so if people have seen the Blood Boy episode of Silicon Valley, like right. That is why that's why that exists, because there is something vampiric about the way that some of these companies relate to the world. And I don't know. And like I said, I think it's literally probably not true. But there is some, it may have some kind of metaphorical value.
Right. I mean, I remember just recently reading a story about how Jeff Bezos is investing in some sort of like scientific group that's working on building like a fountain of youth or something like a.
Well, and that is absolutely real. I mean, these guys are definitely, and Thiel is, and I get into this in the book. I mean, Thiel is definitely, investing back in these companies. He wants to live forever. I'm not sure how much progress has really been made, but that's certainly the ambition.
Right. Now, really, like I said, so much to talk about, but let me see. Let's talk a little bit more. We just spoke about it really briefly early on, but I wanted to get a little bit more into it. Is just how much Peter Thiel seemed to have been involved during the Trump administration. Like, from that dinner he attended with Zuckerberg and Trump, that was secret, that, it did come out last year, I believe. But no one knew the details until you spilled the beans in your book. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I'll give you the kind of quick overview, and of course there's lots more detail in the book. But basically, so Thiel is the longest serving board member, on Facebook. He's a mentor to Zuckerberg, and after Trump got elected, there was a lot of pressure from the right on Facebook. Facebook, as I argue, and I think it's really important to remember this, despite the kind of rhetoric you hear from from some on the right, Ben Shapiro or whatever, like Facebook is very, or maybe Ben Shapiro is the wrong example, but there's this meme that Facebook is anti-conservative, and I think that doesn't really stand up. Like, conservatives do very well on Facebook, arguably, maybe better than a lot of people on the left. But the right was very successful at pushing this meme that that Zuckerberg was too left and that he needed to like kind of help the right. And Trump was, hammering all the tech companies, and in particular Facebook. And Thiel kind of steps in as this power broker, as the guy who can, first of all, put Mark Zuckerberg and Donald Trump in the room together, as somebody who can get Mark Zuckerberg to, maybe go a little easier on some of these conservative figures. And you see, if you look at like the top stories, the top highest performing stories on Facebook for a long time, for years, it would be like 5 Dan Bonginos, 3 Ben Shapiros, 1 Fox News, and like a cute animal, right? It's this like entirely right leaning. And I think to some extent that is Thiel's influence. There is this dinner, as you said, during which, as I report in the book, Thiel told, a colleague that, there had been a deal reached between Zuckerberg and Trump, where Zuckerberg was going to kind of promote, do more to promote these, right media outlets, or maybe promote is a wrong word, but not rein them in. And I think there's been a lot of reporting, so that's new. But there's also been a lot of reporting to show that Facebook, from BuzzFeed and others, to show that Facebook was, really kind of favoring certain outlets. And so I think, that is, I think it's really interesting. And I think it also just raised a lot of questions because, Zuckerberg is like the, he's like the dictator of Facebook. He has super voting shares. Peter Thiel has a lot of influence over it, but Zuckerberg can do whatever he wants with that company, with very few limits, beyond legal limits and things like that. And the fact that he has this level of control over it, over what everybody, what 3 billion people in the world experience, and the fact that this guy, Peter Thiel has such a profound influence on his ideology. Like, I think it's really worth trying to understand, what Zuckerberg's ideology is, what Thiel's ideology is, because they are in a lot of ways like, setting the agenda. I mean, if in some ways, Zuckerberg is more powerful than any world leader, and yet I think a lot of people just really don't understand like how he thinks about the world. And so like that's kind of like why part of the reason I wrote the book, because I just think, we really need to understand these people and understand, what they want and how they think, and that'll help us figure out how to deal with them.
Right. And so to close things out with our conversation, what's next for Peter Thiel? Like we discussed, those you named a few candidates he's backing, but that seems sort of I don't know, like very entry level for Peter Thiel. Like I feel like he's got like that's just what he's putting forward to play like the game that needs to be played. I feel like there's got to be something working in the background.
I'm sure there is. I think there were, at post Gawker, there were people in Thiel's camp who were trying to urge him to like do another, it's like, what's next? Like, what's going to be the next kind of like crazy supervillain thing we're going to do? And as I understand it, there wasn't like another conspiracy, although, it's possible that I'll be surprised. That said, I think there are a couple of things going on that are sort of worthy of note. So one is Thiel has kind of made it his mission to go after Google. And it's kind of, what is kind of inside baseball, maybe, but you're seeing this kind of concerted effort. If Thiel's another, sort of what is the next target after Gawker, I would say it's Google, because Thiel has in all sorts of ways, both, through Trump, both through his own comments and both through some of these candidates that he's backing, put the company and through some kind of internal activism where these conservative activists within Google are sort of, causing trouble for the company and getting some support or at least encouragement from Thiel. Thiel gave a speech a couple years ago where he accused Google's management of conspiring with the Chinese government, without any kind of substance, said the CIA should investigate them, which is like, I mean, like I don't know, like and he not only said that, he said they should do it in a not gentle manner. Which, like, if you know anything about like the history of the CIA, is like it's kind of like saying, oh, we should torture the Google executives. Is that the implication? Like, and I'm sure he was sort of being glib, but it was just like planting this huge flag, saying like, government, Trump, investigate these guys, and I think like that has a couple purposes. One of which is to take some heat off of Facebook, to help Facebook. But I do think you shouldn't underestimate these candidates as he's backing. And I mean, like I said, yeah, it seems small time, but Thiel has, if they won, which again, no sure thing, the Republicans probably control the Senate, and there would be 4 senators. Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Vance, and Masters, who would kind of owe their owe a huge part of their careers to Thiel, where Thiel would be the main factor, and 4 U.S. senators, in a tight, whatever, in a Senate that's pretty narrowly controlled, is a huge amount of power. Especially, if the Republicans control it, right? Those guys on the right are going to have a ton of power, because they're going to be the ones who say, no, you can't compromise. Like, we're going to walk away. So I don't know. I think he could end up with more power, in 2022 or 2024 than he had even in 2016. And these tech companies, they're not getting any smaller. Facebook's reputation has suffered a lot over the last 4 years. The company's market capitalization has grown immensely. It's no less powerful than it was. It's more powerful. So Thiel, it's like, I think to some extent he's like, whatever, lulling people to sleep. People think he's out of the game, but he's not out of the game.
I think that's a great way to really, leave people to because, I think a lot of people hear all these things about Facebook and it just piles on. But I think this is something that really stands out. The fact that this guy is still so heavily involved, and not just involved with like the company, like he's someone who maybe some like high up executive is like pals with or something, which would be problematic in its own right. But this is a guy who's hanging out with Mark Zuckerberg and attending dinner parties with him, private dinner parties with him and the president of the United States. I mean, this is problematic if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really worth, and and this is something like, my book is not, it's, I try to be, whatever, pretty down the middle. I think this is something that everyone, not just, I think obviously people on the left are outraged rightly, but I think it's something that everybody should be paying attention to. And like the power of these tech companies, it does have a political dimension to it, but it's not only political. This kind of sense that that a handful of companies control a huge amount of our information ecosystem, like that crosses political lines, and that's something that like everyone should care about, and whatever, including your conservative friends or whatever.
Right. Max Chafkin, thank you so much for joining me tonight. This was really a great discussion. Everyone should check out his new book, The Contrarian, Peter Thiel and Silicon Valley's Pursuit of Power. It just came out yesterday, if you're listening to the podcast, which comes out after. It just came out this past Tuesday, September 21st. So this is hot off the presses. It is now in bookstores and wherever you buy your books online. Go check it out. Is there anything else you want to tell people about, where they can find you online, anything like that?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I mean, it's my handle is @Chafkin, CHAFKIN. Totally happy to engage, or whatever. Feel free to hit me up, or if you have questions or things like that. And yeah, definitely check out the book. I'm really proud of it, and I think people are really going to like it.
Thanks so much. Have a great night, Max. Take care.
Thanks, Matt. It was a really pleasure.
Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, 1 second. Let me just log. Here we go. Oh, that was really fascinating. I mean, Peter Thiel is someone who is I've kept tabs on for a while now, but he's never really been the center of my own personal research and work and reporting. So it was really fascinating to learn more about him from Max, who clearly has dove into Peter Thiel's life, perhaps more so than anyone. I mean, I didn't know that about his early life, and I didn't know quite, everything he was doing during the era of him sort of, dabbling in Ron Paul revolutionism. So it was really fascinating to me. So definitely check that book out, The Contrarian. Folks, we're going to go to the second half of the show. If you are watching live, you can stick around. For everyone else, you should, if you want to access that show, you should go to patreon.com/MattBinder and support this show if you can. A Patreon subscription helps keep this show going. If you missed last week's show, YouTube has demonetized my channel. I am working on getting it remonetized, but as of right now, it is still demonetized, which means I am not getting a revenue cut from any of my videos that the YouTube ads play on. And most importantly, and what affects me the most, is that you cannot leave me a super chat right now. Super chats are turned off on my channel until this issue is fixed. Not by my choice, by the way. So you will, if you want to support this show and you would usually drop a super chat, what you need to do is go to patreon.com/MattBinder and subscribe if you can. And I made this call for subscribers due to the demonetization last week. And a lot of you did want to help this show during its time of need. And those people who became patrons since last week's show, I will name them right now as a thank you. They are Nick J, Anthony C, Charles R, Chris, David T, Eric, Nick, Steve, Nicholas. Oh, a lot of first names. People who just go by their first names, I should say. Denise P, Celeste R, Shmoo, which is, I love that name. I don't know if that's your real name, but I love it. Christy S, Ben W, Perpetual Work in Progress, Awesome Possum Blossom, love that. Cameron and Alan B. Thank you all so much for supporting this show and subscribing to our Patreon, the Patreon at patreon.com/MattBinder. Also, if you're a podcast person, doomedcast.com. That's where you can listen to the podcast. There's links to Apple Podcasts and wherever else you subscribe to the audio version of the show. As always, youtube.com/MattBinder, twitch.tv/MattBinder for the live streams and uploaded videos. What else? At MattBinder on Twitter, on Instagram. Oh, ratethispodcast.com/doomed. Go there for links on where you can give this podcast reviews, the show reviews. If you can leave an Apple Podcast review, that would be great. We were doing good on the reviews, getting regular reviews coming in. But oddly enough, we haven't received a single written review for the month of September, which is not what usually happens. Maybe people have been busy with summer ending, back to school. I get it. So if you're that one individual who summer never ends and there is no going back to school, maybe you could take a minute to leave a review at Apple Podcasts. And what else? I think that's all the the housekeeping, house cleaning, whatever it's called. On the second half of the show, we got some clips to play. I'll open the phone lines, go to Skype, sign into your Skype, and search Doomed Live. Call there. I'll take a call or two. We did a Wednesday show this week because I really wanted to talk to Max, and he was. This is the week his book comes out, so he's doing the interviews, the tours. You know, he's booked. He couldn't do the show on the usual Thursday night. He had a book event to do, so I moved the show to Wednesday. This is not the new night. I know last week we did Wednesday as well because it was my significant other's birthday on this past Thursday. Wednesday is not the new night, but when we got to move things around, Wednesday works sometimes. I did say we were going to watch a movie. But we didn't do that this week because the movie we were going to watch together on the live stream coincides with a guest I want to bring on the show to discuss that movie. And obviously things got moved around. We will watch that movie and I will reschedule that guest. I'm not going to give any more details. It'll be fun to be surprised about what it's about. It's about a specific conspiracy theory. And also I'm still working out the scheduling details, so I don't want to give hope where things might be pushed back again. Who knows? But working on it. It's going to be a great show. And if it doesn't happen, whatever in its place will be a great show, just like this week was a great show. So folks, stick around for the second half of the show. Patreon.com/MattBinder. If you can support this show financially. Other than that, if you are not sticking around, I will see you next time on Doomed. All right, we are back. Thank you for sticking around with us if you're watching live. We got a lot more show for you today. Let me open up the. Give me a second. Let me open up the phone lines. I'll take a call or two. Not going to go crazy with the calls tonight. Sometimes the show goes on. Oh, I was already signed into the. Whoops. I was signed into the Skype already. Now I'm back in. All right, phone lines are open if you'd like to call in. Doomed live on Skype. I'm going to queue up a few. Fortunately, don't have the super chats to read. Still demonetized. That sucks, right? They want me to send in a video explaining how I do the show so I can prove to them that I don't reuse other people's content, which is just, it's ridiculous. But I'll do it. I'll do it if I gotta. God. Let me pull up a clip. What is this here? This is a clip from last week. One second. No, this is a clip from last week. We don't want a clip from last week. We want new clips, right? We want new clips. Oh, let me play this. Let me play this, and then we can get into some other stuff, right? All right, so let's do this because this is something else, right? All right, let's do this. So Bill Gates goes on PBS NewsHour the other day, and he asked about his connections to Jeffrey Epstein. And now, listen, Bill Gates is a very, very wealthy guy, one of the richest people in the world. He probably has teams of people doing all sorts of various things that you would have teams of people usually working on, and also things that you or I would have to do in our regular everyday lives. We all got to do, chores and who knows what else, but Bill Gates has other people to do these things from. Now, you would assume he's got a good PR team, right? Someone to tell him, to put together a well-written speech that doesn't get him into too much trouble on whatever issue is going to be brought up. So he has some sort of, TV ready, ultra clean, non-controversial response, right? For whatever question may fly his way. Apparently, either Bill Gates got to fire his PR team, or Bill Gates think he don't need a PR team to craft his response to this question. Because this is one of the most bizarre things I have ever really seen in my life. Really, it's weird. Without any further ado, here is that clip.
It was reported at that time that you had a number of meetings with Jeffrey Epstein, who, when you met him 10 years ago, he was convicted of soliciting prostitution from minors. What did you know about him when you were meeting with him, as you've said yourself, in the hopes of raising money?
I had dinners with him. I regret doing that. He had relationships with people he said, would give to global health, which is a interest I have. Not nearly enough philanthropy goes in that direction.
He's clearly uncomfortable. I mean, obviously, he's uncomfortable with this line of questioning. I guess you would be if you were hanging out with a convicted sex offender who was basically prostituting young women, sex trafficking. We're talking underage girls as well. This is a guy who was already convicted and spent time in jail for doing this. Obviously, later on, even more comes out. But at this time, we knew enough. And Bill Gates is going over for dinners. And this also begs the question to me, though. Like, why does Bill Gates have to go to Jeff Epstein for money? This is one of the things that is really baffling about Bill Gates's Epstein connection specifically, right? Listen, if you're some rando who doesn't have any connections and you got this nonprofit or even for-profit startup company and you're trying to get, Jeff Epstein's this rich guy with connections, you're gonna, if you're someone who has questionable morals, you might make the play that this guy is gross, or maybe you don't think he is, but you might make the case that this guy's gross, but I'm doing what I need to do for the success of my business, my organization, myself, whatever. And you would go to dinner with Epstein. And that could be, your way of, explaining it. I was running out of resources. Epstein was my ticket into this world. I needed to do it. Again, I'm not saying that's a good case to make, but it's one that makes logical sense. Who does Jeffrey Epstein know that Bill Gates doesn't? Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, one of the richest people in the world, household name. Everyone knows Bill Gates. You say Bill Gates to, I don't know, like a tribe in the Amazon, and they'll probably be able to tell you, oh yeah, we've heard of him. Who are these connections Jeff Epstein has that Bill Gates doesn't? It's so weird to me, right? It's like so weird to me. It's really, I mean, maybe you could make the argument. I mean, obviously, you can make the argument that Jeffrey Epstein probably knows a few wealthy pimps and sex traffickers that maybe Bill Gates doesn't know. Are those the people Bill Gates is trying to meet to donate to his global health philanthropical endeavors? I mean, there's no rich person that Jeff Epstein knows that Bill Gates does. Or even if Epstein does know some, like, some financier that Bill Gates didn't, so maybe some, like, I don't know, finance guy, hedge fund guy, old, I have no idea who, but let's say there is. You mean Bill Gates couldn't just ask someone he knows for that person's number and just call and say, hey, I'm Bill Gates, and I would like you to have a discussion with me, a dinner with me about possibly donating to my philanthropical efforts? I mean, come on.
Those meetings were a mistake. They didn't result in what he purported, and I cut them off. That goes back a long time ago now. So there's nothing new on that.
It was reported that you continue to meet with him over several years. And that, in other words, a number of meetings. What did you do when you found out about his background?
Well, I've said I regretted having those dinners.
But that's not the question, right? You regretted having those dinners afterwards, right? The question is more so, what did you think about that stuff when you were sitting there having a filet mignon or a lobster with Epstein? Like, what was going through your mind then?
There's absolutely nothing new on that.
I mean, it's not like he was sitting there at the dinner table going like, I regret this.
Lesson for you, for anyone else looking at this?
Well, he's dead. So, in general, you always have to be careful.
That's the lesson learned.
And, I'm very proud of what we've done in philanthropy, very proud of the work of the foundation. That's what I get up every day and focus on.
Very, very, very weird. And it had a lot of people talking, which is obviously not what you want when you're asked this line of question. Like, this isn't the moment you want going viral, right? This is just, I've never seen anything like it. Again, can you find this with some like rando, some like, someone who doesn't have the resources of Bill Gates? Maybe maybe they get famous, they have 15 minutes of fame and they're put in the spotlight. Sure, you could probably find clips like this, but for someone of Bill Gates' stature giving these answers with this sort of body language, being so confounded by the line of questioning, I've never seen anything quite like it. It is bizarre. Very weird. All right, I had to hang up on Skype because I had a few people call. I'm calling back into the system. Call into the Skype now, and I'll take your call. Let me let them know they could call back in. I'll give them a second here. Everyone's talking about the Bill Gates video now in the YouTube chat. Dude, this is nuts, says Ricky. Adam says, dude is a psychopath. Ricky says, he always doing that shit with his hands or just when he's backed into a corner? La Rose says, very weird interview. Yes. Mila says, very relieved that dead men can't speak. Disposable Thumb says, very gross. It is, I feel like I could even just on my own without a PR team very easily handle that line of questioning if it came at me. Well, for one, it'd be very easy for me to handle because I would simply not go to the house of a known sex offender / pedophile for dinner. It seems like the easy decision to make up front, to just not put myself in that position. But I mean, I'm not as smart as Bill Gates. I don't have those billions. So who knows? Who knows what rich people do with all their good ideas? Marty says Melinda Gates spilled some beans, is why we know this. She has more beans to spill. I mean, she left them over it, right? I mean, that's the case, right? That's what came out. They amicably split up. They put out that video because they didn't want their philanthropy to be in danger because they've built this huge organization. Let me take this call. But she said through the grapevine, apparently, through the reports, that was a huge strain on their marriage, his dinners with Epstein. Hey, you are on the air. What's your name? Where you calling from? Hello. I do not hear you. I have to let you go. I'm sorry. Call back if you figure out why the sound's not working. Doot. Sorry. Let's go back to the phones, maybe. Nug Wrangler says maybe Melinda always wanted to leave and the Epstein stuff was an opportunity. Perhaps, sure, that could be possible. Marty says only reason heat is on Bill Gates is because Melinda is divorcing him and she leaked some to get leverage on Bill. Let's go to the phones. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Renee. How are you? I feel like it's been a few weeks.
Well, I tried to weigh in on when you were like talking to those Straserites, fifth positionists and stuff like that, and Jimmy Dore and all that. I'm very disappointed, but after all, you said yourself you weren't going to climb on a tank and I guess shoot a cannon at City Hall yet. Right, local stuff here in Chile. There was like one of the like representatives that were like proofreading and agreeing on what the new constitution was about.
Mm-hmm.
Got into a kind of a scandal regarding that he faked being sick with cancer.
And
that
doesn't sound...
and he also like did like some because same like in the United States, since our health insurance and health system isn't we don't have universal health care just like in the United States. What people do is a lot of like crowdfunding, fundraising. Mm-hmm. Usually it's something pathetic as like a party or something like that, and they sell hot dogs and they try to like do things like that. And so he like crowdsourced his and basically people were like annoyed because it was a scam, and basically they forced him to resign. But he did look sick. I mean, there's like allegations that maybe he had AIDS and things like that, and he said he came out of the closet. He was like basically a kind of like very important figure in the Chilean protests, because he would go out and like fight the police, and he was like a very slender, like pale, like very what's the word, like emaciated figure. So he has to have like some sort of disease. It might be like AIDS or something like that he doesn't want to say because of like the backlash and things like that. But that was like the past scandal here in Chile.
Oh, that sounds. I mean, it's I mean, I feel like there's been something like that here. Like it's really starting to come across my mind, but I can't think of anything specific. But I feel like something like that, not the exact same story, but something similar here.
Right.
There's always
if I
some
was
sort
being
of
too literal,
there's always
it'd
some
be
sort
like
of
one of the
weird
founding
like.
fathers having something like that, right?
No, I feel like even more recent than that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, no,
I'm
I
just
feel like
talking
there's
about
always local politics are weird, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I also mentioned it because it has several threads, and basically, it was kind of like denounced and pushed through social media and all that.
Right.
And also to convert something like, I guess, serious within your sphere of things. There's also that dirty rat that's kind of like far right here in Chile, and he's trying to push kind of like ¿Cómo quedó? Ya te robaste un pe- sí. He kind of like pushes like a kind of like a advertisement that he's in neither right wing nor left wing because all are like involved with corruption.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's his second play at trying to be a presidential candidate or like push political propaganda.
Right.
Okay,
I think I'm sorry.
I'll leave for once.
I think I hear one of the kids waking up.
Oh yeah, I have my mother. You have your children.
Right. Oh, that was your mom. That was Mama
Yeah,
Renee.
yeah.
I heard
Mama
someone in the
Monteos.
background, and I assumed it was a family member of some sort, but I didn't want to be presumptuous and just claim who
Right.
I had
Well,
no
it was
idea.
very high pitched.
Well,
It could have been like me imitating my mother, like Psycho or something like that.
that would be. I mean, that would
You wouldn't
definitely
put
be.
it past me.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that would make for some entertaining live streaming.
Yeah. Okay. For once, I'm gonna.
No,
let
not
you
for
go.
once. For Nate, always a pleasure when you call in. Love the updates from Chile. This one was very interesting because just goes to show you that there's piece of shits in politics all over, right?
Well, yeah, but I thought of it as like it was like I'm starting to use the word Karen a lot on social media and Facebook, and I'm just saying like it's basically what the right wing's trying to do, and I'll let you go with this, is trying to basically culture jam and sabotage the entire process, saying it's a waste of money, it's a waste of time. We should just keep the old Pinochet era constitution and all that. And the gateway to fascism that all politics is corruption and blah blah blah, and their corruption, I guess, is invisible.
Right. All right, Renee, thank you so much for the call. Always a pleasure, buddy. Take care.
Okay, bye.
I think my kid might be back to sleep now. Frank says Binder's kids sound like an old Spanish lady. Sorry, Chilean lady. Frank followed up. No, that was both my kids and Frank and Renee's mom. Phone line's still open. We'll take maybe one or two more calls. What time is it? We got some time. Didn't realize we have some more time here. Let's go to another clip I have here while we wait for people to call. Let me cue this one up. Nope, don't want the Bill Gates one again, that's for sure. Right. I just saw this before. I gotta play this. This is ridiculous. I can't believe we're still having this discussion. I can't believe this is still a thing. I can't believe this is still a thing. Like I can't believe this is what people are talking about. And I guess did this happen recently? I should check this out first, actually. I saw this just now. It wouldn't surprise me if this is still going around. Oh my God, it just happened, didn't it? is this really something that just happened? All right, I don't want to play it if I'm wrong then. Does anybody know if this was on a recent episode of Jimmy Dore? The Nina Turner thing? This is... Yeah, I think it just happened. All right, I'll play it. I can't believe you would still talk about this, quite frankly. I mean, this is... I don't know what's going on in that show where this is still the hot topic conversation. But apparently, Jimmy Dore is still talking up Nina Turner's loss in her Ohio District 11, I believe it was, election back in, what was it? Was it early August? I think so, right? Just, this is he had on this guy who goes by Socialist MMA on Twitter. He's another one of those Dore-esque People's Party types, the same type of politics that, like, the Convo Couch, those two people I had a debate with a couple of weeks back. That sort of like anti the squad, I'm further left than you type, ridiculousness. But here they are talking about Nina Turner's loss to Chantel Brown, who was the centrist in the race, and obviously Nina Turner was running a progressive campaign as the left-wing candidate. And I mean, let's just play it. Because I don't even. This is just. I saw this making the rounds, and I had to give it a listen. Here we go.
How could you be running as a progressive for Congress in the middle of a pandemic and not show up to a Medicare for All march?
Oh my God!
And then you're surprised you lost? You're surprised more people didn't show up for you? The most popular policy in the country is Medicare for All. You don't show up for a Medicare for All march, and you expect people who have a revolutionary spirit to vote for you, to get off their ass to vote, and then you lose and you don't know why?
Well, I mean, this is just, I went through this. I did videos on this March for Medicare for All event that happened in July. That was put together by these Dore-esque types, the force the vote people. Again, I'm not anti-political activism, on-the-ground activism. I actually told people where they could check out details for the march, and if it was something for them to definitely go down and check it out. I did not shit talk the march or the organizers. My issue with it was the people who were saying this type of stuff. The fact that going to this one specific event made it or, basically made it or broke it if you were a true leftist, which is ridiculous. There are direct actions on the ground, in the street, activism, events going on a regular basis. People cannot go to every single one. Missing one does not kill your left-wing bona fides. Yet, because these guys don't usually do these things, the March for Medicare for All became their Woodstock. Like, this is it. This is the one event. The same way your hippie parents in the 60s talk about Woodstock because they were weekend warriors who just went to these rock concerts, when it was like the one big event to go to, and weren't like the people going down to the basement shows and the bar shows and the church, the church basement shows and the thrown together punk shows every week, that I was going to back in my day. But no, there's like, it's the same shit. That's the same shit, basically. Like, that's a perfect analogy, quite frankly. Like, this is their one event because they don't usually do this shit for that. They don't usually do this shit. So for them, this was it. So because Nina Turner didn't go to the Ohio March for Medicare for All, and instead on that day did an event with AOC, a campaign event for her campaign with AOC, they think that this is what tanked her campaign, because she didn't show that she was a true Medicare for All supporter because she didn't go to this March for Medicare for All event in Ohio. They never point out that the Ohio March for Medicare for All event did not take place in Nina Turner's district. She would have had to have driven 2+ hours, if I recall, outside of her district to attend the Ohio March for Medicare for All event. I think it was like 10 days before the election day for her race was. Just ludicrous. Ludicrous. Oh, Marla points out Nina is working at TYT now, which is probably why she's back on Jimmy Dore's radar. Of course, right. That makes sense. Nina Turner did not lose because she didn't go to the March for Medicare for All event. Full stop. Anyone making this assessment is a joke. You should not take them seriously.
That is the craziest thing. In the middle of a pandemic, you're not going to show up to a Medicare for All march? The most popular policy in the country. And
I mean, listen, they're also still holding on to these old polls from the primary, all of which were taken in like the first or second quarter of 2020. This is like old. Is Medicare for All popular according to those polls? Yes, it is. Unfortunately, things don't always seem to work out that way, right? I mean, ending the wars was also very popular for quite a while too. Like, bringing our troops home. Yet Joe Biden only did this last month. I mean, if you poll now, I would guarantee probably that there are other more pressing issues, actually. I know people are going to say, oh my God, I can't believe Matt just said that. But I'm sure that for people who are about to be evicted, the number one pressing issue is evictions, and their biggest support would go with the eviction moratorium. People's priorities have changed a bit. Obviously, Medicare for All is still very important. But even Bernie Sanders has made the political calculation to work on other things that have better chances of happening right now. You could agree, you could disagree with that, but it is what it is. That's what the situation we find ourselves in, right?
wonder why you couldn't beat the establishment. I wonder why.
And they made a ton of excuses for why Nina Turner lost. And if you looked at the rhetoric at the time, they was immediately punching down. They blamed the People's Party. They was blaming you.
Yeah.
Well, that's silly too. I don't know anyone who really did that. And the reason that's silly, though, is the same reason why not attending the March for Medicare for All rally is silly, right? Like, the two reasons why that's both of those, that Nina Turner lost because she didn't attend the March for Medicare for All rally, and the assessment that Nina Turner lost because of the People's Party or Jimmy Dore actively criticizing her or working against her, both of those, they're on opposite sides, right? But both of those assessments are stupid for the same reason. And that reason is that your tiny subsection of the left is, quite frankly, inconsequential, unimportant, ineffective, politically non-existent. It is what it is. I would never blame the People's Party or Jimmy Dore or any forced to vote nonsense or anything like that on the reason Nina Turner lost. And that is for the reason that that shit isn't on the mind of voters. The majority of voters don't even know what that shit is. That's also why she didn't lose because of the March for Medicare for All rally, not attending that. I would venture to guess that 99.99999% of the people that voted in that special election did not even hear of such an event.
Everybody except them. I said Nina Turner lost because the squad disappointed their base.
That's right.
Now and people got mad at me like,
that's also fucking ridiculous. Who do these guys, these forced to vote Jimmy Dore folks, who do they think they are? Like, they really think they're way more important than they are. Same for, like, where they place the overall left. Quite frankly. I'm a leftist. I support a lot of the things they probably support. Although we have very different ways of getting about it. Or a lot of things they say they support, I should say. But I also have the political understanding and knowledge to know where the left exists in the current time period. And while it is growing and getting stronger and stronger, the majority of voters do not have the same political knowledge that people in this political bubble have. Yes, are people who vote in primaries and especially special elections more knowledgeable than the average voter who probably goes out and votes during a presidential election? Of course. But that doesn't mean they are in the same political bubble as people who do this day in and day out for their work, for their hobby, whatever it may be. For people who, the majority of these people are not in the online political discourse where a lot of these random criticisms and feuds play out. Quite frankly, the squad also had little to no effect in the Ohio race that Nina Turner was a part of. You think someone in Ohio going out to vote is thinking about AOC in the Bronx? It's ludicrous. Did Nina Turner have AOC come out for her? Yes. Why would she do that? Because Nina Turner knew who her base is, right? So AOC comes out and she's activating her base, leftists. Now, if you want to make the argument that her base didn't come out, that's also not true because Nina Turner's overall vote total and the demographics where that came shows that she won those very votes. In fact, she even won, if I recall, she even won the black and brown vote in that election. What lost Nina Turner the vote is the same thing that looks to have won Joe Biden the primaries and then the general election in 2020. White suburban voters came out and voted for whomever the Democratic establishment was backing. And Nina Turner, specifically, Nina Turner was toxic to them because she basically became the very symbol of the Bernie Sanders campaign, the anti-DNC, anti-democratic establishment Bernie Sanders campaign that they hated even more so than Bernie. Like Bernie, after he lost, put everything in to Joe Biden winning, right? Nina Turner, on the other hand, because of her 2016, her non-support of Hillary Clinton, and then in 2020, what she said about Joe Biden being like just as, a bowl of shit or something like that, she basically created this persona for herself to them, which personified to those people everything they hated about the insurgent left-wing campaign that was really the Bernie Sanders campaign. And they basically took it out on her. They said, we can't have Nina win. And they put all this money, all these organizations threw money into this special election race. You had Clyburn come out and endorse Chantel Brown. Everyone came after Nina. And she lost for that reason. Should she run again? And would the result be different? Yes. And because I think it could be. I think the reaction to that race was very much really like a way of, like an anger management program for these folks. They couldn't hit Bernie. Bernie was supporting full-throated support for Biden and obviously wasn't running for anything too. Nina Turner was the most high profile of that campaign to have an election this year. Or in the past year altogether, since, the primaries in 2020. And so they took everything out on Nina.
Are you telling me that Nina Turner lost because she didn't attend the Medicare for All march, that the squad didn't force the vote? And I said exactly.
Yes!
That's exactly why she lost. So what could have happened if you had
How many people in Ohio District 11 do they think care about that shit? Like, it's so laughable. People do not care about your own personal stupid Twitter grudges. How many people even showed up to the Ohio March for Medicare for All rally? A couple dozen?
actually believed in the squad because the squad was fighting for them. If Nina Turner actually showed up to the Medicare for All marches, if you had Nina Turner actually supported Forced to Vote, if they actually was listening to activists, you will have activists that will actually phone bait, they will actually volunteer, and they can...
No. See, Nina Turner actually had all that. And he's going to get to it in a second, Nick, Socialist MMA. And he's going to get to it thinking he's making a point that he's not making. But let's continue so we can get to that point, and then I'll bring up what I want to say to it.
You get over the finish line. That was my argument. So because the squad turned their base off, that's why she lost.
Nope.
And people got mad.
Nina had literally like like Bernie Sanders campaign staff literally on the ground for her. She had an entire left-wing organizational effort on the ground for her. But we'll get to that in a second with the point he makes, without realizing he's making this point.
For saying that. Now this is the checkmate, right? So if their belief is there's nothing that AOC and Nina Turner could have done to stop them from losing because of the dark money. So if you're saying that the activists on the ground cannot help you defeat dark money, you're telling me that it's impossible to take over the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's two things. The funny thing is, he's making a point he doesn't mean to make here. And that is that dark money, tons of money pouring into a race, can completely nullify on the ground organizational work, door knocking, canvassing, get out the vote efforts. And here's the thing. Correct. That's why the left, and really the broader progressive movement, has had such a problem with all this big money in politics. I don't know when Socialist MMA got into this whole political world, but, for a long time, the left has had a real problem with something called Citizens United and money flowing into our political system. And that's because it basically undermines how political campaigns work. And basically, it no longer means that the best candidate wins. The best funded, the most well-funded candidate ends up winning. And that's because all the door knocking in the world cannot equal millions upon millions of dollars flooding the airwaves with someone's name. Now, are there candidates who overcome big money spending? Yes. This is usually easier for small campaigns, for local campaigns. I would say it's definitely easier for a congressional race in the House than a Senate race, which is the whole state. You can certainly make a name for yourself and ingratiate yourself with the people in a district. But it takes a lot of work, and it also, on top of that, requires that the dynamics of the race work out in your favor. It's not always going to happen, and a lot of times it doesn't. It takes mistakes from the Democratic establishment candidate, like in the case with Joe Crowley, not taking AOC seriously. But it doesn't always work that way. Now, as for taking over the Democratic Party, listen, if you think that big money, that dark money wouldn't come in to completely shut down a third-party effort even quicker than an insurgent left-wing campaign running on the Democratic ticket, then I don't know what to tell you. Because even if a left-wing candidate wins, and this is something right up your alley, right? You're the guys who think that Jimmy Dore and Socialist MMA, you are the left that believes that the Squad are a bunch of undercover agents, right? The fraud squad purposely voted in to pretend to be leftists, right? I mean, if that's what you believe, that they were, they were voted in and became, taken over by the Democratic Party. I mean, then why are these Democratic campaigns, the Democratic establishment, pouring all this money in to stop them? If Nina Turner was the next AOC, another fraud squad member, why was there such an effort to make sure she lost? I mean, it doesn't add up in your own assessment of the situation, right? Let's continue playing this.
That's the checkmate. So you're saying no matter how enthusiastic we are, we will always lose to dark money. And hey, I'm sorry, the dark money will always come. The dark money will always come. So if you can't overcome that, if we can't overcome that with Nina Turner, who else is more popular out that is not elected than Nina Turner? If she can't overcome that, then we might as well give up the failed strategy of taking over the Democratic Party.
I mean, Bernie Sanders is bigger and more well-known than Nina Turner. And he couldn't win the 2020 or the 2016 or 2020 presidential elections. He just did not, he wasn't able to pull it off. What that tells me is the left needs to do a lot more work in bringing people to our side. I mean, Bernie Sanders did really good, really good. Basically created the modern left-wing movement right now. Whether you're further left than him or not, there's no denying he is responsible. His campaign is responsible for the left-wing insurgents we're seeing. Resurgence, I should say. The fact of the matter is, we're just not there yet. You can't expect... if you want to even go further back, 2011 with Occupy Wall Street, planting the seeds of the modern day left in this country. One that was basically left in shambles during and after the Bush administration, during the Obama years. Even then, even if you want to go back to Occupy, movement's only, 10 years old? With really, in my estimation, really coming to fruition, at least electorally, with Bernie Sanders in 2016, 5 years old? I mean, what are you expecting overnight, really? The left is getting more people into local, statewide, and national seats, quite frankly. City council races, mayoral races. Look at Buffalo. State Senate, assemblies. The left just needs to keep doing what they're doing and working at it. If you want to throw in the towel because you see that people are losing, which is going to happen, it's going to happen. But if you want to throw in the towel because people are losing and not attending your random marches, then you could do that, I guess. You could do that, I guess. If it's not really helpful to the movement you claim that you're a part of or want to see succeed at the very least. It is what it is, though. But the idea that Nina Turner lost because she didn't attend the Medicare for All march and didn't, I don't know if she was for forced to vote or not, but didn't vocally advocate for it enough or whatever. It's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. All right. I think that's the show. I don't see anyone else calling in. If someone wants to call in right now, I will take one call. If you're still with us and you're not a patron, patreon.com/MattBinder to support this show. Once again, we are demonetized right now on YouTube, so missing super chats, and which is the real loss, and then the small amount of YouTube ad revenue share. So your support at this time would be greatly appreciated. All right. Damn, sometimes we get tons of calls, like to the point where I have to tell people I'm sorry, I cannot. Oh, here we go. What's your name? Where are you calling from? You are on the air.
Hey, Matt, this is Dr. Gus calling from Florida. How's it
Hey,
going?
Dr. Gus, great to hear from you, my friend. How are you doing? What would you like to talk about?
I'm pretty bummed out, man. I'm one of those DACA people, those DACA illegals. So it's been a rough week, kind of expected, but pretty low morale around the immigrant community with this whole bill and whatnot.
I'll be honest with you. I have been a little bit out of the loop over the past week or two. Got some things going on, and I haven't been paying attention to certain things. Only so much time in the day. Can you give me a quick, if you don't mind, a quick rundown?
The Democrats were hoping to include a pretty big immigration reform into reconciliation. And they were doing some weird gimmicky shit that they always like to do. They were making the case that immigration reform would work as part of reconciliation because when you give green cards to a bunch of people that don't have papers, they'll be eligible for federal programs like Medicaid and Medicare or whatnot, and so that would have a negative budget implication, as in what the Republicans say as to why they don't want immigration reform. Anyway, they were trying to be kind of beat them at their own game, and the parliamentarian who happens to be an ex immigration prosecutor for the DOJ, so she was basically trying to trying cases to deport people. She said that yes, sure, it does have budget implications, but it doesn't clear the bird rule because it's too. Basically, it would bring too many changes into society. Like it's too big. Same as minimum wage. When it got turned down by the parliamentarian, it cannot be included into reconciliation. So it would be stopped by the filibuster if it gets tried. So this was kind of like the last hope that immigrant community kind of had to have any kind of immigration reform. It was supposed to give green cards to about 8 million of the estimated 12 million undocumented people. But yeah, right now it's looking like it's not going to happen. The Democrats said that they were going to try to change the date of some other immigration bill that they had from kind of the Reagan era amnesty. I think that's what it is. I might be wrong about this, but they want to try some other gimmicky shit to clear the bird rule. But it seems pretty obvious that this lady just doesn't want to include immigration into reconciliation. So it more than anything, it looks like kind of pantomime to say, "Oh, we tried, but the Republicans are not letting us." It's been pretty rough. The morale's pretty low. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to affect the Democrat chances in the coming elections, because I feel like a lot of Latino, saying Latino as a category is doesn't mean much. It's not a really useful category other than when it comes to immigration. That's like the only thing that really roughly unites the Latino community. So I feel like a lot of Latinos are going to disengage from the party. I don't think they're going to go out to vote for Republicans, but they might lose a big chunk of the Latino vote to just like not caring this coming election. So I don't know. I don't know what they're planning.
Right. I mean,
Right now.
the Democratic Party's been doing bad with Latino voters. I remember reading that Bernie Sanders turned out this huge Latino base in California during the 2020 primaries. One of the one areas where he was able to really completely shut out Biden. And then fast forward to the recall election, which obviously Gavin Newsom won. But I remember in the polling leading up to it, now I don't know if this changed, but in the polling leading up to it, it showed a completely disengaged Latino community in that election, one that could have possibly cost Newsom the election if it didn't turn out the way it did,
Right. I saw somewhere that Latino men actually voted against Newsom, 55-45. I might be wrong. It was a political headline. I didn't go into it too much. But yeah, I mean, I found that pretty surprising. I don't know very much about the Latino community of California or maybe Arizona. Arizona actually worries me because it's the one state that seemed to be turning blue especially for the coming elections. But now they're gonna. Bernie did so well with Latinos there in the primary. Oh man, those were such happy times. And then I don't know what's gonna happen now. I know that in the Florida Latino community, there are hundreds of thousands of people just waiting for an excuse to just be able to, go Republican. They're just waiting for an excuse, and well, I mean, they're being given the excuse now. They can just. I've heard a lot of people, mainly men, and also Latino men that identify as white. They repeat this a lot, saying like both parties are the same. The Democrats actually don't care. So now they have like a kind of, it's not real proof because the Republicans are shit in this case, but they have something to point to as to, Democrats are not doing anything. So I don't know. It's looking pretty bleak, to be honest.
Right. I mean, I guess we'll have to see what happens. That's definitely something to watch out for. And I mean, I don't know it seems really simple to reach out to this community. Have they tried using the term Latin X? I feel like that will go over really well, and that'll bring.
Oh yeah. Well, they love that one. Yeah. That one's it's so hard, Matt. That one's so hard. In South America, they're using. I don't know. Do you speak Spanish at all? Do you know?
I know that X is pronounced like X or something like that, right?
Yeah, but it's not even that. So in Spanish, when what they're trying to do to use inclusive language in this sense, instead of saying Latino or Latina, they say Latin with an e at the end. So that's what's being pushed in the Spanish speaking countries, and in Argentina, for example, it's been being adopted a lot. The president has been using it and all that. But then this Latinx is like coming out of nowhere. It just sounds ridiculous. It's pretty funny.
I mean, listen, if someone prefers to be referred to as Latinx, then that's cool. But the idea that that's like the default now, I think, is ridiculous. Especially when the word Latin exists.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you don't want to use what is it, like I forgot what it's called, like a gendered pronoun, or I don't remember. But it seems like the fact that you don't have to use Latino or Latina, you could use the Latin American community or even just the Latin community.
Yeah, and with Spanish it's even harder because every single word has a gender. Like water has a gender. Like chair has a gender within the structure of the word. So it's even kind of more difficult to make it an inclusive language. It's a pretty active discussion right now, and the language itself has a main body of people in Spain that they say what goes and what doesn't go in proper language. So there's like this whole thing about these Spaniards colonizing South America with language, and I don't know, it's crazy. But yeah, definitely that Latinx is not really flying in the Spanish speaking communities. It's very much an American thing.
Have they tried Latin Y, Latin V, Latin Z? I don't
think that's going anywhere.
I saw something on Twitter where the ACL, and it was, and it seems like very much in this sort of same thing, but the ACLU quoted an Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote. Hold on, let me find it. It's the same sort of. And they changed the terms in the quote where she refers to women and her to refer to people and like they or their. And it's like, oh, here it is. Let me pull it up on the 1 second. Let me pull it up on the feed here. Give me 1 second so people can see. Here it is. Okay, so with Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, we lost a champion for abortion and gender equality. And on the anniversary of her death, the fight to protect abortion access is more urgent than ever. And the quote is, the decision whether or not to bear a child is central to and they put the word person's life in there. 2, they added their well-being and dignity. When the government controls that decision for, and they added people, they are being treated as less than a fully adult human responsible for their own decisions. And it's obvious that instead of persons, she used the word womans, and then instead of theirs, she used hers. And listen, I am all for using inclusive language, and I hate people who are bothered by respecting people's pronouns or preferred name. I would never do anything to, I feel like people who do that are like the lowest of the low. How hard is it to respect someone's personal choice on what their name is or what their pronoun is? But to change a quote, I think is ridiculous because, first of all, it makes Ruth Bader Ginsburg seem like she was the woke one, like, when she was clearly saying woman. And I mean, it just seems silly. Like, it seems like something that trans people are not even asking for. I've never seen a trans person say, change quotes to, make them use the proper, more inclusive terminology. It's just not, I've never heard that before. And I feel like it's just like, I mean, you basically turn into the very thing that conservatives make up as like the fictional worst case scenario. And like when you do something like that, I feel like you just fan their flames and give them a non-existent like ammo.
Do you think how does this happen? Like, do you think there's more than one person sitting around the table trying to figure out like, okay, this is what we're gonna do today? Like, it's kind of weird, or is it just one intern that came up with this idea and like trying to retcon RBG's wokeness? Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't understand. I guess it's to try to. I'm sure some of it is very earnest and really trying to do what they think is the right thing to do. I think there's also a lot of it that's like, PR, corporate PR, like social feel good type mumbo jumbo, where it's like, oh, this is what we need to do so we can be woke. You saw a lot of companies doing that after, George Floyd's killing last year, and then like during the Black Lives Matter protest, all these companies falling over themselves, all these corporations falling over themselves to seem woke. And it seemed very inauthentic, and it was very inauthentic from a lot of them. I mean, it seems like, I don't know. Are there people who do like that and appreciate it? Sure. But I also don't think it is something that's being asked of, and specifically these scenarios we brought up.
Yeah, and I feel like that kind of thing is usually more appreciated if it comes together with actions, right? If, right, like you said, it's cynical, then it makes it easier for the other side to be even bigger assholes about it.
Right. I mean, listen, I'm sure the ACLU actually puts their money where their mouth is, especially the ACLU in terms of,
right,
trans, fighting for trans rights. So, but in terms of like other if a corporation did that or whatever, I would question what they were. I wonder how many anti-trans Republicans they've donated to throughout their history. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, man.
All right, Dr. Gus, appreciate the call. Thanks again.
Yeah. Wait. Before I go, I wanted to ask you something. Have you ever heard of Charles Hoskinson, the founder of one of these cryptocurrencies, Cardano?
Yes.
I saw Matt was in the other Matt was in a big crypto dive maybe yesterday, but I really think you guys should look into this guy more. He is everything that's wrong with crypto stuff and like more. He has these this guy has these fantasies about like actually helping Africa with financial accessibility and whatnot. But he's basically doing this like neo-colonialism with crypto. He already has a deal with like Ethiopia to do things with their education system, and he has this really well, quote unquote, well-made crypto machine going on. It's pretty scary, and the guy's starting to make the rounds with in all these right wing shows. He's like trying to get together with one of the Weinstein brothers in the coming weeks. So it's looking pretty terrible, man. This guy's scary. He's a billionaire. He's this billionaire that's living in Wyoming. I don't know. I think you guys should look at this guy and.
Oh, I think I just lost you. You just
particularly bad person.
Ooh, you fell off. You fell off for a second. You got cut out, but I think I heard everything. Yeah. I will definitely look into. I mean, that's basically what happened. I want to do a whole episode on El Salvador and the Bitcoin stuff there. I saw that Left Reckoning, Matt Leck's show, had David Gerard on, who I've spoken to before for a piece I wrote about cryptocurrency. He's a really great crypto critic. I got to have him on this show. But yeah, I mean, that's what happened with El Salvador, basically. Bitcoin Beach was like the inspiration for El Salvador's leader to bring Bitcoin in as a currency. And Bitcoin Beach, if you look into it, was basically that very thing. A bunch of American entrepreneurs went in there and funded this endeavor, this project to push Bitcoin onto these people for their own gain, really.
Yeah, and actually the whole thing with blockchain is such it's kind of scary, powerful thing. And the people that are and with this whole adoption going on right now, the people that own all these assets and access to the blockchains are all these delusional, mostly libertarians, and like they all have way too much money. It's kind of like that whole problem with the Silicon Valley mentality, but even worse because these guys have even more libertarianism on top of it. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do, especially when they're trying to get into third world countries like or developing countries like this.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Thanks for the call, Dr. Gus. Always a pleasure.
Thanks for taking my call. Have a good night.
You too. All right. I saw there were a few people who were trying to call in. Maybe I'll take one more. Call in right now. I will take your call. Let me see. Oh, here we go. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, I'm calling from northern Wisconsin, and I don't use my real name because I'm actually a high school teacher. So my online handle is the Upio Answer.
Okay,
so
there
Upio.
I'll call you Upio. That works for me. No need to get yourself canceled for teaching critical race theory. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's no joke. It's different times right now. I mean,
I hear you.
It's always been a conservative time, but the activism that Facebook has gotten parents into these days is different from when I first started teaching. So, yeah, thanks, Facebook.
I completely understand. What would you like to talk about?
Oh, I kind of wanted to call in more about last week's topic about kind of how Brianna Greyjoy, her, would you think was she being indifferent or ignorant about what kind of hate groups are like internally and what it's like to actually communicate with them?
I truthfully do not think she knows, honestly. I think, and listen, I 100% am going to, let me put this up front before anyone comes out and says, oh, how could, Brianna, as a black woman, understands racism and, discrimination more so than I can ever imagine, I'm sure. No doubt about it. All black people can attest to that in terms of me bringing something up. Absolutely. However, we're talking specifically about the movements, white supremacist movements, white supremacist organizations, neo-Nazis, et cetera, And that is a whole different ballgame. And I honestly don't think she really is that well versed in that world, to be quite frank. I know people think she's purposefully. I can't attest to that. I don't know. I'm not going to make that assumption or that guess. I do know, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I do know that in the big picture, she's not been around for a very long time in this world. By this world, I mean like the political discourse and what's going on. She is fairly new. I mean, yes, I know she's a well-educated Harvard lawyer, but I mean, she knows law, but that's not the same as the personalities and movements and figures and how the political media world and the political activist world works. It's a very different ballgame as well. And she really, I mean, I didn't know. I did not hear of her before 2016. And I've been doing this for over a decade now, professionally. Was into politics in my youth, obviously, but I've been working in politics and political media for almost more than 11 years now. So, I just don't think this is her area. And on top of that, she just is, just doesn't know. Oh, did I just lose you? Oh, I lost you. Let me call you back. I'm sorry. Uh-oh. Let me take a different call. And you can call me if you want. Call me back. Oh, his computer crashed. In the chat, his computer crashed. Okay. Yeah. All right. So listen, I can't guess. I mean, I believe she's well-meaning. I have had her on this show. I do think she has fallen victim to the content creators disease, where you just do what you can to create highly viewable content. And I say this because of all the way she promotes a lot of her content. Controversy creates cash, right? Hey, you are on the air.
Hey. I'm not going to take long. It's Zoe from Montreal.
Hey, Zoe. How are you?
I just wanted to mention quickly the fact that we had the federal elections in Canada on Monday.
Oh, right.
And to the surprise of absolutely no one, absolutely nothing changed.
Right. I mean, I think that's... I wasn't paying too much attention to it, but I had a feeling that it would go that way. Like it or not, it seems like, Trudeau is got the whole thing going down exactly, the media game and a young guy with good looks who says the right things to the majority of people who just aren't really that attuned to everything and just come out when it's time to vote. I mean, same thing happens here, right?
Yeah, well, for him, it's kind of a failure because he wanted a majority government, and that's what he was hoping for by calling the elections. But he ended up with the same kind of government where they have to work with other parties, which means
Right.
not a lot happens.
Right.
So yeah, that's it. Nothing. Only 3 parties gained. Like there's 6 gains.
Whoa! There was some crazy Skype issue in your. It was like a crazy voice change scenario.
Oh.
You sounded
Okay.
like a robot for a second.
Possible that my internet sucks.
Right.
Anyway,
Or you
yeah.
just entered the matrix and you are now.
Yes. Don't tell that I am actually just a code in the system.
Right.
So yeah, there's 6 gains across the whole thing, and that's very not much. Anyway, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you for calling in, Zoe. Always a pleasure. And thanks for that update on what's going on in Canada. I think people might have been listening to this and wondering, is Justin Trudeau still Canada's Prime Minister? Oh my God. I don't know. I got to tune into Doomed and find out.
Unfortunately, so yes.
Thanks, Zoe. Appreciate the call.
Appreciate. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bloop, bloop. All right, folks. I think that is it. I am going to say. Wait, someone else was trying to call in. Let me see. Okay, this is the absolute last call. That's it. Hey, what's your name? Where you calling from?
My name's John. John, I'm sorry. I'm calling from.
Oh, hey, John. How are you? I know who you are.
Yeah. I was just going to call about. I know you took a break from the internet. I kind of did too, but not voluntarily. I also wanted to talk about. I think a couple of guests have talked about COVID from the perspective of being an employee. I actually got a staph infection around the 4th of July. I admitted myself to the hospital, and I had to get an operation here in Peoria. And then I had to. They were trying to transfer me to Chicago because they couldn't get anyone here to do the surgery on me, the second surgery, which was to abrade some bones, take some bones out, and because they were basically dead, they were infected, and so they had the doctor lined up, but I had to wait 4 days for a hospital bed, and guess why? Because we had a surge in Chicago with all the people with COVID, and so I'm pretty done with it. I just, I spent like 33 days in the hospital. I just got off my my antibiotic. I mean, I could have died. The doctors thought I could have died while I was waiting. So, I'm just kind of annoyed that we still have all these people making up all sorts of excuses to take up resources at hospitals. And some of these people are in the medical profession. My mother was in the medical profession, but I don't think she would have done this kind of craziness. I'm just done with having any sympathy for any of those like Loomer that got sick or anything like that. They get sick, well, too bad. They kind of they made their boat or bed they can lay in it. Sorry.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, it is. Oh, there's some feedback. I'm hearing myself. I mean, it's it's. I listen. I have trouble. Writing people. I think it could be bad for the medical community to turn people down like that. So I don't advocate for that, but I do think they do this in terms of give priority to certain individuals, and obviously if you're there for something that you had no you couldn't do anything about, you should certainly get priority treatment, I think. You know what I mean? But I wouldn't advocate for anyone to be turned down, or I don't know. It's a rough situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not advocating for anyone to be turned down, but I just feel if these people were I mean, it's been said by other people before. If really they have the courage of their convictions, they'd stay out of hospitals, you know.
Right, right. Well, a lot of them think that they're gonna go there and get like the miracle cure, right? They're not even ivermectin. They think they're gonna get that expensive Regeneron treatment or whatever, the mono, whatever they're called, the antibodies.
Antibodies.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know who decides who gets them, other than you having the money to tell your doctor that you want them.
Well, I believe the problem is that they're hard to keep viable, even under cold conditions. They're not. It's not easy to keep that drug stable. So
right.
That's an issue.
Right. And these people are attacking the medical professionals too while they're in the hospital begging for their lives. You know, they're attacking them for not giving them the medication that they think is best for them and all sorts of other things.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's lawsuits now because people haven't gotten ivermectin. So,
right.
I was going to comment also on the whole Latinx thing. I'm a Hispanic. I consider myself Hispanic, so I'm old school. And I think I get the right to basically call myself Hispanic, especially since I come from, my mother was of Mexican-American descent, my father was Cuban, so I get to choose what I want to say, here at least in America.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So,
I mean, I know that, there are a lot of people say don't call us Hispanic, but if that's your personal preference, I see no reason not to do it.
It's more of a cultural thing, I feel, between the East versus the West. It's more Latino, Latina came more, and then Latinx came more out from the West Coast, and Hispanic you'll see more used on the East Coast. So
right.
Anyway, but
thanks.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on with Skype, but it's going all crazy on everybody. It seems like. Thanks for the call, though, John.
All right, thank you.
Always
Matt.
a pleasure when you call in. Take care.
You too.
Gary says Hispanic X. All right. Why? I think something's going with Skype. It's like freezing up. Yet nothing else is freezing up. Something is happening with Skype. I gotta close Skype. Actually. Weird. It is Skype. Something's going on with Skype. Because it totally froze. I had to force quit it. All right, that is the show. Unless Eufio wants to call back in to finish his. There we go. Hey, Eufio, is your computer back?
I think so. I have
an
old computer on a DSL phone line
right
in rural Wisconsin because we don't get high-speed internet in most places around here. So.
Well, make sure you back up your hard drive just in case, because I learned that the hard way recently. So definitely, if there's anything on there, don't let that old computer crash for good. Make sure it's backed up.
Yeah, I got 3 externals, so I'm good there.
All right, cool. Make sure it's recent backups though, because
Yeah, no, I back it up every couple days.
That's good. All right, well, let's finish that call that we had earlier.
Yeah, so that was kind of just wanting to say a little my personal experience because I thought I would be able to talk to one of these extremist groups, because as a school teacher I'm like, well, I have a lot of patience. I deal with difficult students all the time, and so I actually picked on a Sargon satellite group. So, yeah, he was like one of the original friends of Sargon of Akkad. And that was back in 2015, I think it was when I started talking with them. And it's amazing how they were, they didn't start off as some radical group. But as the couple years that I dealt with them wore on, they did get more and more racist in their rhetoric, more and more extreme in their ideology, and how they would talk in Discord was, just shocking for, how they talk, in public. You'd be a little surprised with, or maybe you wouldn't be surprised with how Sargon is privately than publicly. But yeah, it's tough to, because you have to, like, if you actually want to reach them, or some people in the community, because you're not going to change the leaders of the group. You're more talking to maybe the people who recently joined or whatever, and you have to, like, pick and choose what battles you'll fight with them, or when you'll disagree with them, and you have to laugh at some of their jokes, type of thing. And it really is emotionally draining. I mean, it really is, because you're really not being yourself. And I definitely did not, this was a Sargon group. That author, I haven't read her book, but I'm sure that the crowd she rode with were probably much more hardcore. And yeah, for Bree to just be so dismissive of what that experience is like for her was kind of upsetting. And it's, and I don't want to be too, the reason I asked about, you about Bree, because, maybe you know her a little bit more, or her intentions, because myself 6 years ago, I would not have known firsthand what it's like to do that. And after going through that, and I had to walk away from the group because I couldn't handle it. Last year, I had my fiance passed away, and then my mom passed away, and so that yeah, things happen, and man, my patience was gone, and so I lost any sort of ability to maneuver in those waters anymore, and like I said, they got darker, with the whole George Floyd situation and stuff, and so yeah, I just couldn't deal with it anymore, and there's a part of me that feels like I quit because, after certain debates or whatever, there would be people in the community, who would say, "Hey, thanks for saying this or that," and but it did just become too hard emotionally, and yeah, so I just kind of wanted to throw my 2 cents in that, yeah, I mean, that shit's real when you try to actually reach them on an emotional level. You're sacrificing a bit of yourself while doing that. At least I think so. Like I said, maybe I was doing it wrong, but
No, I mean, that's a great point, honestly. And I again, I don't know her all that well. She's been on this show, and I know she's been on. Michael knew her a lot better than I do. But I mean, I think I think she's doing, she's good intent perhaps when doing. In this specific interview, let's talk about. I think she had good intent in doing the interview. She didn't mean to do anything, but she saw the way the interview was going, and I think she dug in because she saw she would have something. To be quite frank, you could see it in the way she's promoting it. She promoted the show, and I think she saw that it was going to create some attention and hype, and possibly get her more subscribers. That's what I think happened. I think it's that simple. I don't think there's any devious intent there with that interview from the get-go or anything like that. I think she wanted Talia on to talk about the topic for real, saw the way it was going, and was like, I can make something out of this that could even be bigger than the initial discussion.
So you don't lump Bree in with kind of Jimmy Dore at the moment?
She used to. That used to be an easier question to answer. That used to be obvious. No, I don't. But since the forced to vote stuff, I don't know what I would say to that. Honestly, do I think she's as bad as him? If I did lump her in there, no, not at all. But is she in the same category? I don't know. She's certainly in some sort of gray area.
A gray zone?
A Brianna Joy gray zone. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I should talk to her about it, to be quite frank. I should have her on or see if she wants me on and we could discuss this. She could have that far right discussion she wanted to have with Talia but didn't. She could have that with me if she'd like.
Yeah, and actually, this is the time in a non-election year to have, tough discussions or debates with the left, because I know there's some on the left who say you shouldn't be debating other leftists because you have to focus on common enemies or whatever. But I don't know, because I think you've always been discuss anything with anyone, Sam Cedar, the same thing. So, I mean, it's a lot tougher to have tough debates with a fellow leftist, if it was like a month before the general election. That's what, made what Jimmy Dore did during the Nina Turner campaign even more egregious, because,
Right.
yeah, obviously he didn't personally impact the election, but I don't think it wasn't from trying, because he on the show for, the previous, 6 weeks leading up to the election, all his coverage on Nina Turner was negative. The only time he would bring her up was because, she's seen with AOC, who is a traitor. Or I know Jimmy Dore's wife had a few things slagging off Nina's true intent or whatever, calling her a huckster or something. And
Right.
I mean,
listen,
yeah.
I do think she has gone the route of it's all about the show. It's all about her project more so than anything else, in the same way that Jimmy Dore is more about, everything he does. He'll turn against the politician for doing nothing more than just turning down an offer or not responding to an offer of coming on his show. So, that for sure is where I would say she's in that same world as he is. I don't, in terms of like her politics, though, I don't know. I would have to listen to more, I guess, of her show, which I just haven't, honestly. That's why, I listen. I'm being extremely because I see Grim in the chat. Thinks I'm not, he told me to get real. She did this on Rosh Hashanah. I don't think she even knew it was Rosh Hashanah, honestly. Come on. I honestly think she did not pay attention to that shit, please. She also worked for Bernie Sanders, the most prominent, like, Jewish politician in the United States. Do I think she, like, is some anti-Semite, like Grim is implying in the chat? No, I don't think that. I do think she's making the calculation, though, that having this opinion when she saw where the conversation was going would create good content. And I also think there's a play there for viewers. In the same way that Glenn Greenwald is making a play for a specific type of viewers. I think there's overlap with Brianna and Glenn Greenwald. They see there is opportunity, a market for people who just want to go against the grain, right? People who are against the mainstream position, even if it's right, like, wear a mask during a pandemic, go against that, and there are people ready to throw money at you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean, but it just, yeah, the whole Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, because I used to really look up to Glenn Greenwald. It's been really disappointing to see how he's turned out, and yeah, I don't want to see Brianna. I don't want to be that disappointed in Brianna, since I used to look up to her work too. So
yeah, listen, there's been a lot of people who showed over these past couple of months and last year or so who they are and what they, why they were here. You know what I mean? Like what they saw this as, and I'm not gonna name names for everybody, But I think it's quite obvious that there are certain people who looked at this is an opportunity more so than an actual, you know, political belief or work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Which is sad because it is what it is. It's just unfortunate that that's the way it went for some people.
I mean, are you optimistic where you think there's redemption or they will see the light, or do you see these things usually play out in one direction with people?
Say that again?
When you see how Glenn Greenwald's gone and Dora's gone, do you think that's kind of the norm when people start doing the wrong thing? They just go further and further down that route, or do some people start doing the wrong thing and then come back?
There's people who go back and forth all the time. I mean, you'll see it. I don't know whether specific individuals, but I mean, clearly you see that there's people who are bringing their career down a certain trajectory based on where they find they'll have success. And listen, of course, you do that when you're like running a tech company and you have a startup and your platform does one thing and then you see users using it for something you didn't intend for it to be used for, so you go down that route to find the success. Like, sure, that works in certain industries and areas, but with politics, that's not how it works. I mean, that's how it works if you're running a business. Your politics is solely a business, but in terms of if you actually believed in something, I mean, listen, I have paid. Let's put it this way: I have paid the price for not being that type of person. I've paid the price throughout my entire life for not being that type of person. I can certainly imagine in another life, I would have been a lot more successful than I currently am if I was that type of person. But sadly for my children, I'm not that type of person. And, it has certainly affected my career without a doubt. You could very easily, and there's also people who have found great success doing what I do. So it's not just that. But I'm not just talking about in politics. I'm talking about in music as well. I've just stayed true to what I believed and wanted or stood for, and turned down different things or didn't do certain things that could have been a lot more successful. Like, listen, I could churn out clickbait bullshit content. I could easily sit here and tell you that, Jimmy Dore is absolutely right. Nina Turner shit the bed because she didn't attend the March for Medicare for All rally. I could tell you that white supremacists and neo-Nazis should be reached out to and get them on our side because I view them as valid human beings who are just, run astray or something like that. I can tell you that this mask mandate stuff has gone too far and we need to stand up, and I could attend a college event like Michael Tracy and stand up for the rights of the liberal arts majors who were spending thousands upon thousands of dollars to attend a college and they can't have their college campus parties. Hoo-hoo. That's the real curtailing of freedoms, right? But listen, I just don't care about that shit, the shit that's inconsequential, and I don't believe in the shit that I don't believe in. And so I can't sit here and lie or convince myself otherwise, unfortunately, for my bank account. But that's just, I'm being truthful here. And that's also why I'm being upfront, too, about my opinion on why these people like Tracy or Greenwald or Brianna or Dore or whomever are doing what they do. Listen, I'm a straight shooter here on this show. I don't hold back. If I'm being wishy-washy on an answer, it's because I actually truthfully haven't sussed it out yet, and I'm not 100% sure myself. I've told you guys with 100% truth how I feel about all sorts of things. That you get uncensored Matt Binder on this show.
Well, we all appreciate the uncensored Matt Bender.
I hope you do, and I appreciate your appreciation.
Yeah, no, this was the first time I'm a Skype call or I've ever used Skype, so I'm glad I figured out how to use it correctly, and it was great talking with you tonight.
Thanks for calling in. Really appreciate the call. You definitely brought up a very interesting topic that I'm sure we'll be talking about a lot more on this show.
Hope so.
Take care. Have a great night.
Yep, you too. Thanks.
Like I don't know what some of these people's play are. Like I don't get some of these plays. Like listen, I cover the right-wing grift. I've called out right-wing grifters well before people knew they were right-wing grifters. I've stayed away from certain people who I had feelings and inclinations they were right-wing grifters. There is now this bizarre like gray zone. I'm not talking about the gray zone. I'm talking about there is a gray zone of people who have not made that play yet are weirdly having some odd positions that I can't. I'm not quite sussed. I haven't quite sussed it out yet. Exactly what's going on. Like, what is some of these folks? What are they angling for here? The contrarians have a weird. They're not all the same. Let's put it that way. They're not all the same. All right, folks. I went well beyond I thought I would, but that's what happens on this show. Have a great night. Thank you all for joining me on this show. There's some more questions coming in. I see about the gray zone. I'll have to get to them another night. It's getting late. Listen, there was that All Elite Wrestling show literally a few blocks from me, like a walk from me, closest the wrestling show has ever been tonight. And when I found out that I just couldn't make it happen where I could go, I thought there'd be nothing else I'd rather do in place of that show than spend my night here with you guys. So I hope you enjoyed this show. I had a lot of fun tonight. And have a great night. I think I said that already. Take care, everyone. I will see you all next time on Doomed.